to the Wisconsin Public Service Commission's Digital Opportunity Mini Conference. And thank you for joining the PSC and the many digital equity and inclusion practitioners from across the state. I'm Milena Bernardinello. I'm the Universal Service Fund and Digital Opportunity Director here at the PSC. And with me, there is our Bureau Director and a PSC team of 5 policy analysts supporting this event in different capacities. Before we fully start the event, we have a few housekeeping to make this a pleasing and smooth event. Please mute your microphone. The mini conference will be recorded and shared after the event with the related slide deck. So you all are gonna receive both. Each panel section is set for 55 minutes, including time at the end for a question and answer. And at that point, you can unmute your microphone. The panelists will have their camera on for the whole duration of the session, so you can really see the conversation running. There will be 3 breaks of 5 minutes each in between sections. And with this clarified, we can start to talk about Let's Go oriented on the plan for the day. The aim of the one-day mini conference is to share, connect, and learn about best practices in digital equity work, grant writing, and some key aspects of the digital equity grant. The event will focus on how the digital equity community can implement the Wisconsin Digital Equity Plan and bridge the digital divide for all the Wisconsinites. First, we will have 20 minutes with our keynote speaker. Then we will have 3 55-minute panel discussion sessions, which will be facilitated by PS staff. For each session, we aim to provide to you all the best practice of how to and lesson learned shared by our panelists. And lastly, we will have less than 10 minutes closing note with our Bureau Director. So without further ado, I will introduce you to our fabulous keynote speaker. We are very honored to have with us Regina, notoriously called Gina, D. Cooper Benjamin. Gina is the Deputy Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, noticed as NDIA, and she shared a deep commitment to bringing human-centered approaches to solving our toughest problem using technology and data for social goods. She has 20 years of experience working in under-resourced community, and she's passionate about introducing youth and teenage girls, particularly, to coding. She has a master in public policy, graduating from Wellesley College as a Davis Scholar, and she has a certificate in nonprofit management and leadership. Gina will share with us more about the digital divide and the work that she and her colleagues do toward digital equity at the national level.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction. I think my computer is a little delayed, so I apologize in advance. I have shut everything off to try and speed it up. So good afternoon, Wisconsin. Thank you to Alyssa, Damar, Josie, Melina, the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin, and the Digital Inclusion Community of Miss Wisconsin for having me here today and for hosting today's Digital Opportunity event. PSC is a trailblazer of digital opportunity across the country. Wisconsin Public Service Commission is one of only 2 state utility regulators that provide grants for digital inclusion work. As leaders in digital opportunity, it's an honor to be asked by PSC to provide opening remarks. Being in community with others is where I find the most comfort. So thank you for trusting me and welcoming me here with you. Collaboration and community are the keystones to addressing the hardest problems that we face, including the digital divide. Events like this that bring us together across municipalities, Native entities, state agencies, school districts, the UW system, workforce development agencies, nonprofit organizations, and the private sector are paramount to collective impact. All of us here today working together is how we advance digital opportunity. Today's event emphasizes the importance of spaces that promote knowledge sharing and grant writing, digital navigators, and coalition building for sustainable solutions to the digital divide, job creation, and economic growth. My name is Gina Cooper Benjamin, and I'm the Deputy Director of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, or NDIA. I've always seen myself as a technologist at the intersection of tech and social good. I love tinkering with technology, data, and data systems. I discovered this love as I worked on education gaps. I built complicated algorithms in Excel for more efficient reporting to the federal government. Then, when I worked on housing gaps, I loved working on systems. And I also found myself wanting to connect youth experiencing homelessness to coding programs and other tech opportunities that would enhance their job skills. One day, I was looking for some resources that I could use for digital skills training, and I came across this amazing organization, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and joined the listserv. In 2021, they posted a role for deputy director, and I thought, this is it. This is the perfect opportunity, so I applied. Not only did I discover the resources that I needed through NDIA, I found a new job. While leaving my previous role was difficult, there was never a hesitance to join the NDIA team. I came to NDIA for the mission. NDIA advances digital equity by supporting community programs and equipping policymakers to act. We provide spaces and opportunities for our community of over 2,000 affiliates to come together for education, learning, fellowship, and fun. We listen and we learn from our affiliates, then we create publicly available tools and resources. Nothing is ever behind a paywall for anyone to discover and use. We just ask that you credit us. On the other side of that, we talk to policymakers and share what's happening in communities. In fact, our work with policymakers served as one of the driving forces behind the Digital Equity Act. So that $2.7 billion in the Digital Equity Act, it's the largest investment in digital inclusion to date. DEA is the most active systemic approach to closing the digital divide in US history. We work with practitioners and policymakers because we believe that everyone should be able to safely navigate the digital world in the way that is most meaningful for them. To this end, we educate and provide tools and resources on low-cost internet, strong device ecosystems with low-cost options, digital skills training, and technical support. Essentially, we talk a lot about technology and digital access while centering humans and human experiences in the process. We work to expand digital opportunity and impact the lives of all community members, whether you're in Milwaukee County, Menominee County, or Vilas County. Sorry, y'all. I am from Boston, so my pronunciations might be off on a few of the things, but I think you'll get where I'm going with this. So I'd like to start the day by celebrating local bright spots across the state. Today, I'd like for us to celebrate the city of Racine for turning their Smart City initiative into a digital inclusion initiative. That's digital navigation programming and device distribution with ARPA funds. This demonstrates the power that federal commitments can have on our communities. I'd like to celebrate Wisconsin's Chippewa Valley partnership with the United Way of the Greater Chippewa Valley to form the Chippewa Valley Digital Inclusion Partnership, or ChipDIP. That is a very cute name, by the way. I love it. ChipDIP serves as a regional coalitions model and gathers practitioners, advocates, and allies from across the region. We're celebrating Door County, who aligned digital equity needs with broadband access planning. They serve as an exemplar in connecting community organizations across sectors to assess, plan, and alleviate digital needs within a community. We're also celebrating the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, who began convening a digital navigator network in late 2024. Okay, so I know that we're all virtual. I said we're celebrating. I really like when people celebrate. I want to see y'all clap. I want to see you put yes, yes, Alyssa, that's what I'm talking about. Thank you all. So it's okay to celebrate ourselves. Okay. As much as we're here to celebrate bright spots, we're also here to ideate and share solutions for some of our toughest challenges and roadblocks. We're here to discuss sustainable funding and funding sources, to raise awareness and support, and to address disparate digital inclusion ecosystems. While these challenges may seem insurmountable in this moment, I think that I have some ideas for you, and I know that there will be amazing ideas that arise throughout the afternoon. According to the American Community Survey data, 26% of Wisconsinites do not have home broadband. This is not just simply a poles and wires issue. Yes, that's part of it, The other part of it is this work that NDIA and affiliates across the country are doing to support internet adoption. One of the biggest factors for adoption is affordability. Mothers, fathers, caregivers should not have to make a decision between paying their internet bill and paying for groceries or other essential utilities. To help, NDIA regularly reviews the sea of internet plans out there. We created a low-cost internet rating system that we call NDIA Grading Internet for Good, or GIG. We designed GIG to evaluate the quality and affordability of low-cost plans. Through GIG, we assess 7 criteria areas, including cost. We don't think that anything above $30 a month is considered low cost. And eliminating barriers for those who qualify. So no contracts, no termination fees, and most importantly, no credit checks. How many of you have heard, I don't need the internet as a reason for the reason that a community member is not online? Probably most of you. This response is rooted in fear. Fear and insecurity are other big factors when it comes to adoption. NDIA affiliates, some online with us, run programs that include internet safety skills, which build confidence between the beneficiaries of our work, like elders and teens, and the technology they use for civic, social, and economic participation. Sorry about my camera. I turned it off. Additionally, NDIA has an honor roll of low-cost internet plans for anyone interested in learning about low-cost internet offers. Through the honor roll, we score all of the discounted broadband plans that internet service providers offer. Honor roll can help digital inclusion practitioners navigate and understand what options are available from a range of ISPs. We've created both GIG and honor roll because affordable internet options lead to more consistent connectivity to service. Are you all ready for another statistic? Okay. According to American Community Survey data, 20% of Wisconsinites do not have a desktop or laptop at home. Those likely to not have the devices that they need to work, go to school, and schedule appointments are those who can't afford them. Those with disabilities who need assistive technology to operate computers. Those who have fears about breaking a computer or a computer system. Those who need them most. Luckily, there are national organizations like Digitunity, an NDIA affiliate who does systemic level work to address barriers to computer ownership. They focus on policies and practices to engage local catalysts. There are other national programs like Easter Seals, another NDIA community member. Some of their affiliates set up assistive technology resource systems centers with low and high-tech solutions to help people live more independently and achieve their goals. And in communities across the country, including yours, there are local refurbishers offering affordable solutions to computer ownership. And a fact sheet produced by NDIA, ILSR, and AARP, we encourage state and local governments, as well as nonprofit and philanthropic organizations, to create programs to distribute devices to those who need them. Our communities need affordable, sustainable computer ecosystems to mitigate the device barrier that prevent them from accessing school resources, scheduling appointments, looking for jobs online, and participating in e-commerce, where retail sales happen in the modern digital world, fuel a significant portion of spending, which helps stimulate and grow the economy. Okay, I have one more statistic for you, then I'm done with stats for the day. According to the National Skills Coalition, 92% of US jobs require digital skills. That's based on data and science. I like to say that 100% of jobs require digital skills because I haven't found a job yet that doesn't require some level of digital skill knowledge. Some of the industries requiring skills include manufacturing, retail, healthcare, food services, construction, and agriculture. Many NDIA affiliates focus on foundational skills ranging from Microsoft Office to data entry to point of sale skills. Some, and I encourage this of all, are starting to integrate AI in their digital skills training. They're educating community members on the basics of AI, its pervasiveness in our day-to-day lives, its inherent biases, its challenges, and the practical uses in which we can gain benefits. When thinking about digital skills, it's important to focus on what's in front of us, and as technology evolves, it's important to think towards the future too. The evolution of technology is a factor in why the digital divide exists and will persist. We need strong investment in skills training. Public, private, nonprofit partnerships, and strong digital skills programs that prepare our workforce, including youth, for the jobs of today and the future. A key NDIA resource is our Digital Inclusion Program Manual and listserv, where you'll find an abundance of tools and resources. When it comes to navigating solutions for connectivity, devices, and skills, digital navigators are one of the greatest resources for our communities. We need to replicate programs and partnerships like Forest County, an NDIA National Digital Navigator Corps member who, with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Extension, was able to hire a digital navigator and effectively serve hundreds of residents, providing skills training, technical troubleshooting, cybersecurity training, and device distribution. Forest County's digital navigation program shows the ubiquitous need for directed digital inclusion activities. Digital navigators have been around for a long time, a very long time, and we've been iterating on the model since its inception. These trusted guides who assist community members with ongoing individualized support have existed in libraries for as long as I can remember. I can remember in high school taking my summer reading list to my local library branch, Fields Corner in Boston. I can remember the care with which my librarian insisted that I move away from the card catalog system and move towards the new digitized system of finding books. I can remember the library making me sit down at the computer and learn Mavis Beacon teaches typing, aging myself a bit with that one, before heading off to college. This is a role that libraries play in communities. This is what libraries mean to people like me. Libraries are key partners in the execution of many successful digital inclusion and digital navigator programs. Unfortunately, the current assault on the Institute of Museum and Library Services will impact the delivery of digital inclusion services for millions. Small and rural libraries with limited local funding will feel the loss of their IMLS grants the hardest. We must protect and preserve our libraries and ensure that our communities do not lose the critical programs that these anchors provide. That's education programming, essential early childhood programming, and digital inclusion programming. Beyond libraries, since 2020, the Digital Navigator model has spread across communities in different modes. Some NDIA affiliates set up digital navigators in healthcare settings. One member of NDIA's National Digital Navigator Corps is an Iraq War veteran in rural Texas. He drives hours between clients to deliver digital navigation services to military families. Another NDIA community member, Shaping Our Appalachian Region, a nonprofit dedicated to rebuilding economically distressed communities in Eastern Kentucky. They meet community members where they are, including the local community college. Digital navigators are important across all communities. For those of you who want to get more involved and to plug in all of our work, I can't underscore the importance of coalitions enough. You can find fellow allies, those with shared goals, and people you can trust within your local digital inclusion coalitions. NDIA tracks digital inclusion coalitions across the country. In fact, we have a cool new map, which you'll find on our resource sheet. In fact, I've mentioned some coalitions, new coalition formations, who are part of today's event. Please visit NDIA's coalition page and review our coalitions guidebook. You don't have to start big, but you should start. Some starts look like a round table that focuses on planning to set a solid foundation before they flourish and grow into a full coalition. The work that we do for students taking online classes, parents connecting to their children's teachers and student portals, teaching seniors how to access their electronic health records and the cute photos of their kids and grandkids, and enabling adults with disabilities to participate more fully in their communities is very important. Digital access helps the unhoused find a food bank or emergency housing needs, or even artists and museums to curate digital experiences or spaces of joy for all to experience. Digital access is about the teen who dropped out of school and is ready to complete their high school equivalency, the single parent who wants to better themselves and their family by attending community college, the veteran who wants to connect with other veterans for support and learn digital skills to acquire a job, the farmer who needs to figure out an issue with a crop or wants to learn more about agritech. In the case of a natural disaster or weather emergency, identifying safe solutions, and to help new businesses establish an LLC. I could keep going, but I think that y'all get it. We need to think beyond the digital needs of today and think towards the future. What's at risk if we don't? As technology evolves, we run the risk of having digital gaps so broad that they can be catastrophic. This is why the funding and the Digital Equity Act is so important. The federal investment of the moment codified in law and the Digital Equity Act, will set us up to work for workforce and economic success in the future. Through DEA and Wisconsin, $23 million of capacity and competitive grants would support 81% of the state's covered populations. I have some news though, and it's not very good. This is all at risk. None of the funding in the Digital Equity Act is safe for any of us. Here are some possibilities for what you can do. Identify your elected officials and educate them. Your policymakers need to hear from you to understand what you do, why it matters, and why the DEA is essential for enabling all of our work. You can also encourage your policymakers to reach out to NTIA and NIST about the funding to ensure it's implemented. The NTIA webpage has a suite of tools to help you. Template letters, scripts, state and territory one-pagers, talking points, and a breakdown of the funding for each state and what's at risk. Think about some of the very specific examples I've given today. Rural communities need tech for crop analysis, surveying lands, and other farming efficiencies. Urban communities need youth skill training, including AI skills to prepare the workforce of the future. We all need a workforce equipped with skills to build a globally competitive economy. If you're having difficulties right now, if it's feeling a little heavy, we're all feeling the weight of the moment. You are not alone. The challenges that we're facing around funding and connectivity are not new. Think back 5 years. Where were we? The pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't have the support of the federal government. Communities came up with solutions and used federal stimulus funds to further that work. In times of crisis, communities work together to get things done. If you're having a hard time trying to figure out where to start or who to turn to, join the NDIA community of affiliates, www.digitalinclusion.org/join. Come to NDIA's annual conference, Net Inclusion, May 20th through 22nd in Gila River Indian Community in Arizona. You can join other thought leaders like yourselves to discuss important conversation topics like data and evaluation, research, incarcerated individuals, digital navigators, digital skills, aging individuals, coalitions, barriers to connectivity, AI, health systems, school systems, and multilingual learners, and so much more. You have the power to enact change. Forward together. Thank you for having me, and thank you to the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin for organizing an amazing afternoon. I look forward to connecting with many of you in the future. Thank you.
So thanks again, Milena and Gina, for setting us up with some valuable context for the next session. And thanks for joining us, everyone, for the session on grant writing. We want to keep this interactive and useful for you all. So feel free to use the chat function to keep track of your questions, and we'll do our best to address them at the end or as applicable, perhaps in the midst of the panel session. My name is Troy Hoppenjohn, and I'm a grant specialist on the Public Service Commission team. I work closely with the Digital Opportunity team on the digital equity initiatives. I'll be facilitating our first panel discussion of the day on grant writing tips with an experienced panel of grant writers who we hope will be able to help demystify this process a bit by sharing their knowledge and expertise. Let me see if I can get this slide to advance there. There we go. Excuse me. Our panel includes the following guests who volunteered to share their knowledge and experience writing grants for a wide array of public and private donors. Doris Wessels is the United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha Counties grant writer and applies to a wide array of grants. Doris is like several of our own PSC team members in that she's involved with community radio as an announcer. Charles Pelicane is a nationally recognized expert in digital opportunity and joins us today from Human IT based in California. He has a proven track record of driving significant growth and innovation over 6 years with that organization. By creating impactful coalitions and designing programs, he's transformed communities across North America through technology, internet access, and training to many underserved populations. Sarah Lorenz joins us as well from the private sector today as Manager of Strategic Partnerships with Bertram Communications, specializing in fiber projects. She works on grant funding and community engagement, compliance, reporting, and overall grant management. She also supports project management for Bertram's fiber initiatives. I'm going to attempt to bring down my slides here and highlight our panel members for you all. It looks like somebody's already done that for me, so thanks to whoever did that. Fabulous. This is going smoother perhaps than our last webinar that we conducted, which is great. So thanks to you all. I warmly welcome you to the stage as I pull up the first question of the day. That is, what are the most important early steps that you all take before drafting a proposal? And how do you set up your team for success in pulling together such a proposal? Anybody can, feel free to contribute, but I think we might go to Charles first for his expertise on this. Charles, how you doing?
Doing well. Everyone can hear me all right?
Great, coming through loud and clear.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to be speaking with you all today. And although I am currently sitting in Southern California, I've spent a lot of time in Wisconsin. I actually grew up in the Wausau, Wisconsin area. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison and spent a lot of time in Milwaukee as well. So I've spent more than 20 years in Wisconsin that I'm very fond of, and a lot of family still there as well. But when I think about those important early steps before even drafting the proposal and how to set the team up for success, I really think that there's just a few key activities there, right? First of all, understanding the NOFO itself. And, there's a few pieces to that, right? Thinking about eligibility, two pieces even within there, right? Are you an eligible applicant and are you looking to submit eligible activities? And when we look at the applicant area, I think about is our organization the type of organization that's listed on there? And if not, do we know a group that is, right? Like if a grant is calling for a certain amount of years of experience and maybe we don't have that, can we find someone who does? And even if our organization is listed on there as an eligible applicant, say as a 501(c)(3), is there someone maybe who's better suited that maybe, hey, yeah, we're an eligible applicant, but the way that this is designed may be better for a local government or a research institution or something like that. And so there's really those two pieces there when I think about us as an applicant. Are we on there? And even if we're on there, is there someone who's better suited? And then when we look at the activities, as far as those eligible activities, first of all, is this in line with our mission? Is this what we are here to do, right? And if the answer is no, then that's pretty easy to pass on that application. But if it is something that's in line with our mission, just asking, is this the right thing for us to do right now? Are these the activities that we want to be prioritizing at the current moment? Which brings us a little bit into the evaluation criteria as well, right? When we're understanding the NOFO, thinking about, well, what are they going to be evaluating this project based on? What is most important to the organization that has put out this NOFO? Where is their priorities? And are those priorities something that we want to be focused on? And when we look at how they're scoring the particular RFP, well, what areas should we focus on? For instance, if letters of support or something like that is only 5 out of 100 points and the project plan is 45 points, well, we probably want to spend the bulk of our time on the project plan, and those letters of support can come later. And then when we look at that evaluation criteria and we look at what's really important to the organization that's put out that NOFO, can we win? Are we actually strong enough to win? And if we're not strong enough, maybe in certain areas, do we find a sub-applicant in those areas to help us out? Should we maybe become a sub-applicant, right, and find a better lead applicant based on those evaluation criteria? And so when we think about aligning with the NTIA priorities in regards to the NOFO, if that scope that we've put together isn't mission clear, obvious, and direct, that's going to be a challenge. And we want to make sure that a lot of their priorities, whether that's the NTIA's priorities or whoever's put out the RFP, is actually being repeated back in the scope and making that very easy for them to see. And so, when we think about those early steps, really understanding the NOFO is so critical, But then we want to get organized too, right? We want to build a capable grant team, and we've got to think about, who do we want to work with there? Who uh, on our grant team, who is going to work with partners? Who's going to do the grant writing? Who's going to handle budgets? Who's handling registrations? Is someone trying to Superman this and it's just one person that's trying to do it all themselves? Or do we have that team that's going to be strong in each of those areas so that we can put together a strong proposal? And do we have to identify some strong partners there? Who already maybe does work in this area? Who does it great? And who does this RFP really seem designed for? When you read it, does someone already come in mind? You're like, oh, maybe we should try to work with them and see where we fit in. Or if we're going it ourselves, really thinking, how can we how can we get someone else to fill in there? And then with the registrations, do you have someone who can handle it? Do you have someone that can do it? The timelines can be pretty long. And so making sure you start that early can be one of those common pitfalls as far as not setting yourself up for success. So, I'll just kind of wrap up with, when you look at that NOFO, is it something you want to be doing? Is it something that they're looking for? Don't just force what you want to be doing at the expense of what the group is actually prioritizing, and to leave your ego at the door, whether that's finding sub-applicants or being a sub-applicant, to set yourself up for success. So those are some of the things that
Yeah.
we look at.
Yeah, great, Charles. Yeah, some of the things I heard there, NOFO, eligibility, prepping. Sarah, Doris, any responses? Just sort of keeping in mind that we have about 5 minutes per question yeah, I think we're doing okay, but feel free to respond to any of that.
Sure, I can add on a little bit to what Charles was saying. Um, I agree with everything he said. And with the NOFO, even though I try to be a pretty environmentally conscious person, I will print it out and I will go through it to force myself to read every single line of it. I highlight things, and it is also helpful then for discussion within the team. As far as setting up the team for success, whether internally or externally, I like to make up a timeline. So I will have one document that's kind of the hub for everything. And then from that, be able to assign out tasks like, I'm going to want you to write the narrative for section 11, and I'm going to need finance to do whatever, and setting internal deadlines for everything along the way so that you can complete it all in time.
Thanks, Doris. Yeah, some really great points. It's always important to be able to interact with the document. Yeah, having a physical copy is helpful. Sarah?
I agree with everything, Charles. I think that you had great. The biggest thing I took away from all of this with my stuff is you have to put your ego aside to find that a notice of funding for something might not be best written as you as the grant holder, but as a sub grant, and that you successfully helping somebody else write that grant because you have that part of the knowledge to be able to do that, to have a successful grant, seems to be the magic in this industry, because you get a lot of people that can write grants, but if they don't want to work with other people, they want to stay in their box, it won't ever work together as a team. And then to go off of Doris, I send calendar invites to teams saying this is when this is due, this is when this is due. And after I've read through that NOFO and come up with my timeline, I then put in calendar requests to the teams so that everybody knows when everything's due. And I give a little bit of a buffer. So I never really tell the team what the exact date of when the submission is, because I never want to submit on that last day. So that's my secret of that one.
Planning ahead. Good. Yeah, absolutely. Having Gantt charts and that sort of thing, RACI matrices, that sort of thing always comes in handy. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed, all of that. Yeah.
Yep.
Great. So yeah, fabulous response. We'll maybe move on to the next question, which is sort of more in the project design realm. So feel free to take a stab at this, Sarah, if you like. What strategies do you use to turn a great idea into a fundable narrative? This is sort of oriented toward that design project process and designing a solution. How do you do that, especially when addressing questions of equity and community needs? And just on, while I'm saying the word equity, I did drop the instructions for a digital equity capacity grant into the chat box, which sort of addresses some of those questions that Charles spoke of in his first answer. So yeah, what sort of strategies do you use, especially in the design of programs that address equity and community needs?
Is this one me? I thought I was number three.
Yeah, go ahead. Doris
Oh,
is
this one
taking a
was for
pass on
Doris.
this, and she wants to react to what you have to say. But Charles, you can, if you don't feel comfortable with Sarah, I bet
I can
Charles can
totally
jump
do it,
in.
but I'm normally like, I'm going to start out with I come prepared. So I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look at what that is and what it's required for the, that notice of funding. I'm going to refer to it probably just about every answer I give is the Bible. That's what I call it. And everything's specific and everyone's different. And there is no cookie cutter NOFO I've ever seen in my life. That's the same. I don't care if it's the same entity doing the grant funding. It's not, they're never the same. So I first would very much find the definition of what their equity and everything is considered. And then I'm going to do my research. I'm going to look at my historical data and my research. And I'm going to say, okay, like what's budget friendly, what are must haves, what are nice to haves. And I'm going to wrap that in sustainability because all those things in the NOFO are going to go back to how I even research that before I even start my narrative. Because without all of that, I'm going to rewrite my narrative so many times that I'm going to lose focus. So I want to do my research first before I start that narrative. Um, and then I'm going to reach out to communities. I think most of us that do grant writing in areas or specifics, I submerge myself in the communities, right? I find out what they're about. I interact with them. I attend things, and because that's where you need to be. Like you need to know what their needs are. I can guess what their needs are, but I really want to hear from them what their needs are and see what their needs are because that helps you write from the heart. And I think that that's part of the success of some people with their grant writing is that if you can put heart into your narrative, it tells a story. And that story is what sets you aside from other people. And then obviously adding all the budget and all the other friendly stuff and hitting those points, like Charles said before, are all good things. But I think every narrative has a good heart in it. And when they don't let you do heart, I that's where I stumble a little bit because I'm good at putting that heart in there and doing the research. But sometimes for me, stats are a little boring. I can write them, but I want to write a story about those stats too. Does that
You
make sense?
absolutely, yeah. And
So
you
I
did bring up,
outline it. I start with all my research first. I do, but that notice of funding, I refer back. I dog ear the pages. I highlight. I don't save a tree. I'm going to be honest. I try to, but that's how I do it, and I carry it everywhere. I put it in a binder, and I refer to it. My answer to is look in the NOFO before you answer that question.
and you bring up an important point that some of what you said speak to the question of trust with target populations and developing relationships with them. And I'll just sort of, use that opportunity to highlight the fact that on page 19 of our application instructions, which was the first link that I dropped in the chat there, on page 19, that trust of the community is among the merit and evaluation criteria that are used for the assessment of these digital equity capacity grants. Charles or Doris, anything to add on that in terms of prepping for the program design?
Sure, I can chime in. It is interesting because we have these separate questions, but they're all so intertwined. So speaking to, like program design or project design, like it goes back to what Charles talked about in the beginning, like, are you even the right people to be doing this? Um, and making sure you're not just like chasing some sort of money because it's there, that you're the right people to do it, then I feel like it's easy to then design the program with hopefully the experts you already have on staff in this area, leaning on your impact managers or program managers if you're fortunate enough to have them to help put something together.
Great, thanks, Doris. Yeah, good points. Charles?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what's been said thus far. I'll just add on to it. One of the strategies that I like to use when designing that program is kind of breaking down each plank of the program into a separate kind of item, putting that next to the priorities of the program, and seeing how many we can tie across, right? And ideally, the more priorities can tie to each plank of the program, then we know the stronger it's going to be. But if we've got planks of our program that don't tie to any priorities, well, that already identifies a huge problem for us. Or if it's just loosely tied and there's only maybe like one tie here, one tie there, then we know that there's going to be an issue as far as making sure that it's really aligned with what the group is looking for. And are we repeating back that language and that intention in even the program design? And I will just say, sometimes it's easier than others. Some RFPs, right, are more prescriptive than others, right? And they've got a very clear program that they're looking to do, and you can pretty much just repeat it back. And then some programs, like this one, for instance, has some pretty clear tracks to it, but does have some flexibility there. And it is up to the group to make sure that they're designing something that's in line with the intention. And you can't just repeat it back, but you've got to actually have some creativity and thought into what you're putting together and making sure it's aligned there.
Yeah, some great points. Some of what think I heard across all of what you were saying, the three of you, was, sort of looking at your mission statement as an organization and sort of boiling the problem down as it's been, sort of outlined in the notice of funding opportunity to a cogent problem statement, and then building your program and design so that it addresses that particular problem with a solution that can be easily understandable by the reviewers. So great answers, everybody. Thank you very much. So the last main big question that I think we want to cover for the participants, who, again, thank you all for joining us today. What tips do you guys have for balancing ambition and realism in the budget specifically, but then also ensuring that nothing gets missed through the budgeting process all the way up to that submission date that I think you also talked about very well, Sarah? Go ahead, and if you want to jump, yeah, you seem like you're ready for this one.
So I take a look. That's where I kind of do with Charles, like I did, is I write down all the budget items. First, I go back to that NOFO and look for those definitions. Every grant's a little different. The nice thing is the PST spells them out and gives those definitions, so you don't have to wonder what it means. But those budgeting, so I break down each item and I look at it and I go back to those words must have or would be nice. And then I tie it into the formula of sustainability. And then I look at what Charles says. It is like, so the points value on that to make that budget item be a must have or a nice to have. And we weigh that out. And then, so I put that out first. And then I bring the financial team in, because let's be real, they're the ones that have to make sure that sustainability and budget for business, if we get the grant, makes the most sense, right? So then I have that and I present it to them and I say, listen, this is what I want to do. How real is it? And how sustainable is it? And scoring wise on a grant, is it even going to get us where we need to be? Or what do I have to do different? And sometimes it takes a couple tries for us to go back and forth. But most of the time that must have and nice to have, instead of like pros and cons, that's how I write my columns in my budget and bring it to my financial team, who then looks at me and says, you're crazy, Sarah. This isn't going to work. And then the reality is, if I can only get 50 points and it's a competitive grant out of 100, I need to go back to the drawing board, or I need to scrap this grant, because that's a lot of work for a middle of the road kind of grant, right? Application. So my budget comes down to back and forth, but it's the must have column and the nice to have and sustainability. And if those three are the formula, that's how I come up with what we put in each budget category. And then you got to make sure you cover all your permitting and your surprises. And sometimes the NOFO say you can have your indirect costs like traveling or your meetings. You got to pay attention to what start date you can start incurring expenses that you can be reimbursed for. a lot of people are like, "Hey, I bought materials, last year for a project we never used them. I'm going to save money on this grant, but I'm going to put them in there because I already paid for them." You really got to pay attention to your notice of funding for those budget items because sometimes those aren't reimbursable items. You got to watch those when you're doing those budgeting items on what your your threshold is for reimbursing. Your matching funds. That's another thing I go back to the notice of funding. In kind, cash. I have learned more in my 5 years of grant writing than I ever thought I would, that there are different levels of in kind and there are different levels of cash. And you really want to make sure before you go out and talk to a community and get those budgetaries to put into your grant, that you don't hook them up on something that isn't worth anything for a grant. And it was a nice gesture, but it didn't help you guys. And unfortunately, I've learned a hard lesson a few years ago that you really have to pay attention to what the definition of in kind and cash are. For each grant, they're not the same. But all those in together make that budget at the end of the day. If you could put some nice to haves in there because your matching works out great, then it's great. Otherwise, you go with your must haves.
That's
Did that
great.
help with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. You knocked it out of the park, especially on the budgeting part. How about yeah, if you or anybody else has anything to say about, those final days towards submission, what does your sort of revision and review process look like? How many cooks are in the kitchen? Anything to say about the finalization part of the design and submission process?
I can answer or someone else can. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'll start us off, and Sarah, if you want to fill in for me, with our organization, we have a few different approval levels that have to occur, and if we are working with another partner, they likely also have a few different approval levels. And what we found is really helpful is just bringing in those approvers as early in the process as possible, getting them aligned with the general scope and the general budget so that they don't need to read that narrative or feel like they need to read that narrative word for word and then having the time to mark that up. And we're getting into that level of detail, but really focusing on, hey, can we get the organization aligned on the scope and on the budget? And then the actual narrative, let's leave that to the experts. Let's leave that to the grant writers themselves. And then that has helped reduce our kind of last few days a lot. And then we do actually calendar the submission time for the grant. So making sure there is that calendar time. We try to always do it a day or two before. We make sure that we can get in the systems right away, like once the grant gets out. So that's already solved for. We try to do it a day or two before. That doesn't always work out. Typically, we do have someone who's just responsible for that submission and getting all the attachments and dotting every I and crossing every T is a different person who's maybe responsible for kind of bringing everyone to the table and getting things kicked off there.
Awesome.
Fabulous. Yeah.
We do a little bit of variation of that. Some of the things I do first is obviously you get in the portal or the application process, right? And you figure out what it is. My first year I was here, so almost 5 years ago, we did the CARES Act grant. And I'm going to be honest with you, we missed some applications because we waited until the last minute. And when we went to upload, it was after the 4:59 time and the whole system locked, right? And because we waited for so long, we lost out on 7 opportunities. And we learned a very valuable lesson 5 years ago that you don't wait until 10 minutes beforehand to upload everything, even though it's all sitting there ready to go. Ideally, we like to do it one complete day beforehand, but we've done it as little as 12 hours before. But we have a team that comes in, like for these last round of grants that we had a team that entered everything in. And then we had another team that came in and double checked because there was a lot of numbers. And after you look at numbers for about an hour or two, they all look the same, and transposing can become very easy to do. So we had just a complete fresh set of eyes, maybe not even somebody on the financial team or anything, but just a fresh set of eyes, a whole new team that came in behind us and looked at that. So they weren't the same ones that entered it in. And that seemed to be successful for us. And so, if it's a narrative grant, like Charles, we have a team that sits down and looks at that ahead of time so that at the end of the double checking, they don't have to read word for word and grammatical and anything like that. That's already been done weeks before the grant was due.
Fabulous.
I
You bring
just
up, yeah, go ahead, Doris.
I just want to echo the like never submit on the last day. I personally am very paranoid that like that's going to be the day I break an arm or that's going to be the day the internet goes out. So I always try to submit early. When I get to the point where I think I'm ready to submit, this is another time where I will print it out. I go through it just to catch any typos I may have had. And then the best practice would be to have somebody else read it. And I like to have somebody read it who maybe even isn't familiar with the program to make sure I'm conveying it clearly to somebody who is not so deep in it that you start to make assumptions that, oh, well, like you don't even consciously think about it, but you assume people understand what you're talking about. And this may all be brand new to them and you need to explain it in a clear manner.
Yeah, some fabulous points. Yeah, about the review process and especially familiarity with the platforms. I think I'm going to be a broken record in referencing the links that I included in the chat there, but the Wisconsin Digital Equity Capacity Grant link includes instructions for how to access, get a user ID and password for the two systems that PSC uses that you will need before you submit your application. And then of course you want to be looking at the format in which the application is submitted, which is on the grants management system for PSC. Do you guys have anything to say about sam.gov? I don't know if any of you are all familiar with that process, but I was a contractor for the federal government, and so was abundantly familiar with where that whole system is another step in the process. Any additional
Don't
remarks on
wait
that
until
or
the week
anything else?
before.
Right, exactly.
30 days because you're going to need it.
Yep. Yep. They do
Don't
have
make
pretty good
mistakes.
they do have pretty good customer service if you reach out to them with enough time on your hands. But
Yes, there is. And the other thing is when you're setting it up, make sure you have the right person, making sure that it's renewed every year, and to make sure that whomever that is going to be the administrator of it for long term. Because to change your administrator, it's not. It's tedious. It's not difficult. It's just tedious. That's the best way to say that. So just make sure that 101, if you wait the week before the grant to do your sam.gov, you will never submit that grant. It will never happen. And there are different levels for sam.gov depending on what type of grants you're writing. I didn't know that at one point I had to be fingerprinted because I needed a level 2 clearance. And I did not know that, but I learned quickly that you need to do that for certain grants. So we just went as high as we could. And again, don't wait for a week before, otherwise you'll be just fine with sam.gov.
yeah, good points. So before we wrap it up and open up for broad questions from the group, what do you guys think of sustainability and how do you guys sort of think about that, plan for that, make sure that there's long-term viability beyond the grant period for the initiative that you're undertaking? Any words on that?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about is there something that's going to continue on after this? Have we built a program that isn't going to require continuous funding? Are we maybe, for instance, training a group that already exists that will continue to exist after, and we're using the funding to bring their talent level to a place that this will continue there for a period of time thereafter the grant.
Yeah, great.
We were also looking, sorry, Doris, you go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. I think it'll really strengthen your application if you can show who else in the community is supporting this. I'm always focused on like monetary sustainability and just like, we have the support of XYZ Corporation, that's the biggest employer in town, and they're committed to this for the next 3 years, things like that can show you're not overly reliant on government funding for what you're doing.
I also take a look at for sustainability as far as like the hardware or the equipment that you're going to be, you're requesting funding for. Is this something that's going to last for the 2 years of the grant period and then, be out of warranty? And these poor people are, this program is left with crippling maintenance or upgrades or upkeeps. Looking at that as when you're going for that amount, what you're requesting. I'm not saying go with the highest priced item, but let's be reasonable with I'm not buying a 30-cent item that is going to be sustainable for a long time to this poor community. And then, how can the community sustain it? And can they sustain it after the grant is closed? And for how long can they sustain it? Those are open conversations I've had with a couple of the communities that I'm, assisting with this grant on, is what happens afterwards. Like, how are you guys going to do it? Is it going to be 1 year and then it's done and all this it's going to sit here and collect dust? Like, what is your long-term outlook on this? And I just had very candid conversations with that, and so a couple people have backed out and said we can't, and maybe we shouldn't do that because we won't get the points for that. But I do have two communities that took that seriously and are really going to do that. So I think that's where sustainability and having that conversation is a good thing.
Fabulous points. Yeah. Obsolescence, quality of products, quality of platforms and technology, all totally relevant in this space. Any additional questions or any additional points that you guys would like to make before we sort of open it up to the group for questions? In that case, without further ado, we will call it Q&A time. I think you can still all hear me in spite of the fact that I'm now sharing my screen. I hope that worked. So yeah, questions from the group. Feel free to come off of mute, unmute yourselves if you can, if you have a question. Otherwise, you can drop them in the chat if we're in this space together. It's good to have collaborative learning.
Hey, Troy.
Hey, Damar.
We got a question in the chat. Excuse me. What kind of data would be useful to collect during the project period to advocate for supporting a long-term digital navigator position?
Well, I think to start with, because this, for this particular grant, this being the NTIA grant, and looking at covered populations, there's viewers where you can see at a county census tract level, state level, what the percent of covered populations are. And then in return, also that data, the census data has things as far as like, percent of people in that area who maybe don't have access to a computer or don't have broadband internet, because that's going to speak to, well, if this county has 30% of their people that don't currently have those things or whatever the case may be, that's going to advocate for that position. And again, it goes back, and also if there's a high covered population there, it's kind of a double hit. So it goes back to, okay, what is this funder looking for, and what kind of data can I use to demonstrate that? And for this particular grant, I definitely think it starts with, covered populations, and then that census data on, how folks are actually interacting with digital tools in that area.
Just as a follow-up question on that, do you guys ever collect your firsthand data? You spoke of, some of these secondary data sources and, sort of speaks to the desk review process, but do you ever sort of collect your own data? And if you have something to add to the previous question, go ahead, Doris.
Yeah, we do a lot of device distribution here, and we also have digital navigators. And it's interesting because like I had initially asked like, oh, are we doing like intake surveys and like tests afterwards? And there was a lot of resistance to that, like, whoa, like we don't want to put up more barriers. But we are doing like all that I really needed, which is just asking people, simple demographic info, and asking a few questions about their like previous computer skills. And then as they interact with the digital navigators know to try to gather anecdotes and also track, how many people are they helping? Like if you can show that there is demand for this, that's the way you're going to be able to get more funding for it.
Thanks, Doris. Next question, unless Sarah, anything to add?
Charles covered pretty much what I was going to say,
Sure,
besides,
sure.
location and then Doris added the rest of it. So I think it was really well covered.
Sure. So the next question I see in the chat is, if a group of schools in a region are interested in digital navigators, would you recommend each apply individually or have their CESA apply, including each of the schools wishing to participate? That might be a question directed at PSC. I'm not sure. Is that maybe? Damar, do you have any input on that? Still
I can
waiting for
definitely
you.
give my 2 cents.
Oh yeah, you go ahead,
As
Charles.
Damar is thinking about what input maybe the PSC wants to provide, and I'll stall for you for a moment there. But personally, I always think coalitions look stronger than individuals. Now, there is the alternative train of thought of like, hey, well, we'll apply for a bunch of them and maybe some will win and some won't. But ultimately, if it's all one project and you think you have a strong enough coalition, and a strong enough project, to me that looks better overall. Plus, I do also think empathetically sometimes as far as like what's it like to receive a 11 different proposals that are exactly the same and then having to score those against the others. That's also a little bit difficult for the group that's doing the scoring. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't know if that's an official answer, but definitely want other folks, Doris or Sarah, if you've got 2 cents, please chime in as well.
That's helpful. I'll just, before you guys jump in, I'll just highlight the fact that we do have a coalitions track for this particular grant agreement. And so I think it's important to underscore that there is a particular instrument in this particular grant application period for coalitions like that. Go ahead, Doris or Sarah, whatever you like.
I was just
So
going to say, going off of Charles a little bit, is I would have taken that coalition one step and maybe instead of saying, let's work together, what can we do to work together? Maybe it would even be better and more points value if, we did one digital navigator per 3 schools, something like that, and came up with a team effort like that. Maybe I would even dig deeper into that and see what you could do. Would it be because I think at the end of the day, 11 different applications, like you said, I think the PSC has a lot of undertaking with a lot of other things that they would probably appreciate that there's a story behind it, right? That I could build that story of making these communities with rural schools that need these digital navigators, but maybe don't have long-term sustainability to do one per school, which is what they want. That's a nice have, but maybe not a must have, where that they could share one for every 2 or 3 schools and present it that way.
I was going to add, Charles was talking about the like empathetic point of view, which Sarah also talked about too, but I would turn that on also a little bit of the selfish point of view and just thinking about like who's equipped to apply for this and manage reporting afterwards and stuff like that. Like, is the CISA, do they have a grant writer? Do they have a grants accountant and the people who can handle this much better than the schools? Or is your school strong in that your principal's really cooperative and totally on board, and maybe some of the other schools could drag you down. So I also like I'm always cautious um, about getting like too big because it's more and more to wrangle if you don't have a good cooperative coalition. That said, there is a definite emphasis in this particular opportunity for coalitions and cooperation, and it is always strong. But just make sure that you're also thinking about your own workload and who's going to be able to handle this the best.
Some great points there. And I'll add that we also have another session following this one on the digital navigators, but also on coalitions following that. So you want to stay tuned if you're interested in that subject matter. Any final questions from the group before we maybe take it to break? I think we have time for possibly one more question. If not, I may ask my own question of the group. So yeah, I'm just sort of curious as to Doris, Sarah, Charles, how did you guys how did you guys end up in this line of work? What sort of spoke to you about grant writing or about these types of initiatives? Just sort of wrap things up for us.
I can start. I actually first started doing grant writing, covering someone else's maternity leave, and found that I was really good at it and loved it. And it's very like, I'm good with deadlines. I'm good with details. You give me the instructions, I will follow them. But there's still some room for creativity and writing and building some relationships. So I kind of felt like, oh wow, like I really found where I can use my strengths to help my community.
Sarah, Charles, thanks,
I
Doris.
can go
Great answer.
next. Mine's actually kind of comical. I came with 15 years of operations management behind me, and COVID hit, and I got laid off because I was the second highest paid in the company, and I found a job close to home. I applied for a part-time front desk receptionist position because I didn't want any stress. I wanted zero stress and commitment. I just wanted to answer the phone and say hi to people. And I lasted about 3 weeks, and it was right at the beginning of the CARES grant. And they looked at me and they said, "Hey, you got to help us out, organizational." And I caught the hook on the grant, on the CARES grant, and I fell in love with the fast-paced environment and helping people and doing it. And the rest is history. I loved it. So that's my story.
Yeah, and I'll just close this out with, I kind of fell into nonprofit work. I was working for Liberty Mutual, a large organization, and through my network, met the CEO of Human IT, and I started to do some volunteer work for them, and started going to the warehouse in Los Angeles, and fell in love with the work, fell in love with the people there. And I actually started as our director of operations because my background is really in kind of like lean management and lean consulting. And I never really was much of a networker or anything like that. However, as time has progressed, I find myself doing more and more networking, more and more speaking engagements like this, and have kind of naturally just started putting together partnerships. And I think where I've gravitated to grants and grant writing is I was always pretty good at school, getting those A's when there was a project that was put out there, and I feel like grants are somewhat similar. Sometimes even the scoring's exactly out of 100, so it's very reminiscent of that. And I want to echo what Sarah said as far as like it can be very fast paced. Like you're doing the grant, and then there's a nice reprieve after, and you're kind of maybe waiting for the next one if you've got that pleasure. So yeah, thanks all.
Really great answers. Yeah, you really spoke to the phenomena that I've witnessed in past roles. I used to work for Catholic Relief Services, writing grants for the federal government, and then later for the State Department. Yeah, there is a certain element of, the creativity process, but also the grant writing role specifically does sort of tend to attract those who are slightly adrenaline junkies, right? So thanks so much. This has been a very rich discussion. I think we're at just about exactly 45 minutes, which is what we planned for. Unless there's any final questions from the group, I think we're going to take it to break. So we are moving to the Digital Navigator session, which will be facilitated by Damar.
Yes.
Microphone pending. Technology pending.
Thank you, Troy.
It's all going to be great.
Yeah, dropping the screen share helped out my connection. You all should be able to hear me smoothly now.
Beautifully.
Perfect. So yes, our next panel discussion is on digital navigators. My name is Damar. I work at the PSC. Joining us for this discussion are Ms. Adele Edwards and Ms. Paulina Chavez. Paulina is an experienced digital inclusion advocate with nearly a decade in leading efforts to close the digital divide. She leads the programs team at Everyone On, which is a nationally recognized nonprofit promoting digital opportunity. Paulina has played a pivotal role in designing Everyone On's training programs, which are tailored to both organizations and communities. She has extensive experience collaborating with school districts, municipalities, nonprofits, and other stakeholders to develop strategies that drive internet adoption and digital upskilling. So if your organization has digital skills training needs, Paulina and her team are an excellent resource to tap into. Adele Edwards is the Chief Information Officer for the City of Racine. In 2022, she began convening the Digital Divide Roundtable, or DDR, which comprises nearly 60 social, economic, and educational institutions committed to closing the digital divide in their community. DDR meetings are an ongoing monthly affair and have facilitated connections and solutions within the community. Early last year, Adele initiated Racine's Digital Navigator program, strengthened through partnerships with DDR member organizations. Also in 2024, Adele spearheaded the development of the Racine Digital Equity Plan, and she is currently overseeing the implementation of a device distribution and digital navigation grant. Adele's efforts stand as a testament to the potential impact of municipalities as they turn their attention to the digital divide. And if you would, Troy, stop sharing here. We can feature Adele and Paulina. And to get us started, I'd like to start with maybe some conversation on getting started. Adele, one aspect of your Digital Navigator program, something that Gina alluded to in her opening remarks, is how you got started at the city. So you were initially hired, from my understanding, with the goal of spearheading a smart city initiative, which quickly turned into the Digital Navigator program you're running now. Could you tell us more about that? You are muted yet.
Sorry. Thank you, Damar. I have two jobs at the city. One is I oversee all the city's IT equipment, and the other is I'm in charge of smart city initiatives. When I was hired, I was new to Racine, so I hired part-time students to help me understand the city, and I found that the digital divide was an issue. 27.5% of households did not subscribe to broadband internet service at home, and over 10% of the households solely relied on mobile data plans. And 2,300 City of Racine households, about 7.5%, do not have home computing devices. How could we call ourselves a smart city if not everybody could access or know how to use a computer? So I started by contacting local schools and asking them if they saw a digital divide in Racine, and the organizations around them also said yes, and they all wanted to reduce it. So we created the Digital Divide Roundtable. It's made up of mainly nonprofits that provide services to the covered populations. So that's low income, incarcerated, veterans, those with disability, and those with language barriers, and members of racial and ethnic minority groups. As a city, we have no one residing in rural areas. Using ARPA funds, the city researched different options available for curriculum and determined which skills were important for individuals to learn. We used NDIA's resources. For those of you who were here at the beginning, they talked about a lot of the things that they have, and they have been a great resource for the city because this is brand new work to me. I partnered with an IT instructor at Gateway Technical College, which is located in Racine, to review our syllabus, and created a list of 31 essential digital literacy skills to be learned. Once digital navigators were hired, they participated in training delivered by Everyone On. Paulina actually helped with that, to learn about different training resources and better understand the digital divide in Racine. Trainers initially made their own lessons plans and would practice teaching each other the material. They also later created lessons on cybersecurity and telehealth, and they learned how to steer conversations to keep students on track with the lessons. Trainers would role play through challenging scenarios to help them learn more about how to handle different situations, particularly practicing conflict resolution. We found that digital, as a resource for us, we found North Star digital literacy curriculum met the needs of online training, and our trainers were given access to the material through the Racine Literacy Council. Again, another DDR member was willing to allow us to use that curriculum. Our digital navigators also use products like Digital Learn, GCF Global, and Typing.com to supplement our curriculum.
Awesome. Thank you, Adele. And you had noted that Paulina actually came in to help bring your program online. Paulina, can you talk to us about some of the considerations that go into the development of a train the trainer program?
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to uplift something that I haven't heard too much said explicitly, but I think is important to say here is that many entities that are looking to digital navigator programs have probably already been doing digital navigator services, even if they're not necessarily calling that, especially given the pandemic and some of the schools and nonprofits that Adele, for example, mentioned that we're likely already interfacing with community members and providing tech support. That's digital navigation services. So it doesn't have to feel like this brand new thing that you're kind of exploring. You likely just can tailor what you've already been doing for community to kind of fit, work with the model. So as an organization, everyone on, we have a number of trainer programs, and specifically our digital navigator training program, like the one that we delivered in Racine with Adele and the digital navigators there, really focuses on providing a foundation around the issue of the digital divide for participants. So I remember we did a data walk, like what do the numbers say right now? And what are the implications of these numbers? Like where are these numbers coming from? What are the different circumstances that impact the data, right? We all know that data collection is an imperfect tool that we all use, right? There was a little bit of a conversation around that during the grants panel earlier as well, right? But wanting to give those digital navigators a general understanding of what's happening locally at the state level, wherever possible, and even nationally. It's always good to just be informed about what's happening at a macro level. But then we also generally then dive into what are the available digital inclusion resources. So you're looking into your libraries, your local community college systems, for example, to also how to develop an outreach plan, sharing best practices that we in our organization, our staff has learned in the field on teaching basic digital skills, and what that looks like in being in community. Ultimately, each organization, each situation will be very different, but we always aim to provide a good starting point that will equip folks with enough knowledge to get their program up and running, as we did in Racine.
Excellent. Thank you, Paulina. I could see my video was choppy. Is my audio okay now?
I would say so.
Thank you. Thank you, Paulina. So then I understand in addition to the Train the Trainer programs, everyone else also provides direct digital navigation services in the communities that you work in. And we have, I know that you guys have a bit of a different structure between how you staff your programs. So Paulina, could you talk to us about staffing considerations?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually hire, and for our digital navigator work in Milwaukee and Waukesha counties, we'll be looking to hire independent contractors in those regions. It provides us the flexibility to support our program partners and when we need to deploy those folks out in person. But we also contract out with another organization, actually Human IT, who had a panelist on the previous one, for that have a full call center for remote digital navigator services as well.
Excellent, thank you. That's a great way, I think, to support the community, hiring folks to work with those, work with their neighbors effectively. And then Adele, you mentioned that you hire students. What are some of the considerations that you make as you're looking to hire folks to provide digital navigation services?
So we do hire students, part-time college students, to do digital navigation. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is we have 3 different educational organizations nearby, and so there's a large group of them. Also, they don't cost as much as people who are out of school generally. And so the students get paid, and a lot of them can often get college credit for the work they're doing. The city's the one who has been doing this work, so we follow the hiring rules of the city. And the city is very committed to hiring a diverse range of employees to help connect with our learners. The things that we look for when we hire digital navigators is that the people have some sort of teaching experience. And that teaching experience, I mean, one woman that we hired, she would teach in her church, the kindergartners and things like that. And some of the other members of her church, other people taught their family computer skills and stuff. And it wasn't necessarily computer stuff that we were asking for. We just wanted them to know how to talk to people and teach them new things. We also were very interested in cultural awareness and sensitivity. And we wanted to make sure they had strong time management skills, because our program is one-on-one training. We really hold people's hands for a really long time to teach this and make sure that they really understand it. And so being able to arrive on time and leave on time and things like that were vital. And then we also were very interested in good communication skills, not only during the training, but being able to communicate with others when people said, "So what are you doing here? I don't understand." That was also very important to us.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Adele. And so you've got your digital navigators hired, you've got them trained, upskilled. So where do you start then with a new learner?
So we begin with skill and goal attainment. So when we started our program, we actually used ARPA funds for it. And so I had no idea what I'm doing. Again, this is brand new work to me and all the people that I'm working with. So we're kind of figuring out on our own. Of course, doing research and, using NDIA and other resources like everyone on to help upskill us. But we really want to know where the learner is. And so we take time to gauge their current digital literacy capacity, whether they have no prior experience or some level of familiarity, and then ask them directly about what are their goals, what are their interests. We had one woman that had a job and she kind of knew what she was doing with the computer, but she wanted to do more. She didn't like the fact she really didn't understand what she was doing and thought she could do more. And so knowing that and knowing that she wanted to learn those specific skills so that she could get a better job, that's what we concentrated on. And in the end, she ended up leaving her job and getting a better job. So knowing where the person was really important to us. This pre-assessment basically of the person also helps us tailor our experience so they're both relevant and achievable to the learner. It's not that we don't have a whole list of things, but sometimes, this isn't college where people are coming in and here's your course curriculum and you must follow it. We're really trying to change people's lives, and for changing people's lives, sometimes it's different from one person to the next. So by meeting the people where they are and then building forward, we're better equipped to offer the right resources and pacing from the start. And that's kind of how we approach that.
That's wonderful. That is excellent. Thank you, Adele. Paulina, do you take a similar approach? So in your direct services that you provide, or even from an capacity building, train the trainer perspective, do you take a similar approach?
Yes and no. Similar in the sense that we also do a pre-assessment. We also want to meet each participant where they're at, but we do take a slightly different logistical approach. So for most of our actual digital navigator services, they're delivered ad hoc. So a person will reach out to us with a specific request to learn a skill or want to do, complete a form or so on and so forth. And so it'll be very tailored to what they're asking for. However, as an organization in Milwaukee County, for example, and future in Waukesha as well, we'll be doing actual proper full digital skills training classes. So we bring about 15 adults together. We do a lot of work with partner organizations to recruit individuals and give them the heads up that it is an introductory class. You need to be at a kind of no experience to very little experience level to really get a lot out of the class and kind of go through that cohort experience, that classroom experience. We'll meet with them a few hours a week, anywhere between 1 to 2 hours a week for a number of weeks. We've gone up to, I think some of our longest classes have gone up to 8+ weeks given the population. So for example, a class of senior citizens, elder adults is going to need more time with them to learn the basic skills versus someone who maybe has some familiarity with computers or is looking to upskill enough to change jobs, as Adele mentioned, right? So it just really depends. And we will work with our program partners to tailor our curriculum, our program management to fit those participants.
Wonderful. And I think that assessment is important as well in the beginning, both to gauge where they're at, to meet them with the needs that they have, but then also to assess the effectiveness of your program to see if your digital navigators are making the impact that you intend. All very, very good points. Thank you. Moving on to our next questions. Paulina, you had mentioned meeting with folks. So the trainings that you have coming up in Milwaukee, meeting with folks a few hours weekly for a number of weeks. Adele, how frequently or how often do your digital navigators engage with folks, like coming back to the same individuals or same groups?
So our goal is to meet with learners at least once a week. Now, again, similar to what Paulina said, we partner with our DDR members. And so, as I mentioned, we have DDR members who support all the different covered populations. And so we try to meet with each of them once a week, but there are several classes that learners can attend outside the once a week parameters if the students are willing and available. We train at our Digital Divide Roundtable member locations, the library and the community center. So some of the training we do at the library and the community center is more similar to what Paulina mentioned, a kind of a walk up. Hey, I'm having a problem with my phone. Hey, I've got this one thing I want to learn, kind of a quick and dirty, let me get you past your barrier and then move on, where the other ones are really a long-term engagement. In most of the locations, we have weekly meetings for about 2 hours. And in some, we actually have classes that meet multiple times per week. So it just varies the location, capacity, and the number of students we have. And I mentioned the pop-up lessons on specific topics if we have requests. So for example, we provided 3 different classes for a veterans group on using phones and cybersecurity. So they got all the veterans together, met in a room, then we came and provided the classroom training, went around and helped everybody on it. And then, a month later, we kind of did the same thing, different subjects. So those are some of the things and how we often meet with our different learners.
And Damar, if I can just add real briefly, actually, we, as part of our programming, we aim to provide a device. And so that makes a huge difference in our ability to be able to meet with them on a structured schedule, because then they'll have a device that we've provided for them to continue to learn on. And so we know that that's not usually the case for a lot of places. Devices are a huge part of our budget because of that. So as a whole, we don't serve as many people as others would if you only focus on the training, partly because we understand that there is such a high need for devices right now. We did a national report in 2022, I think it was, that found that most, a good chunk of low to middle income households, which was about $55,000 per year or less, could not afford even up to $100 for a computer. And so I don't know when the last time you saw a $100 device anywhere in a market. I haven't, right? And so we know that that's still a huge need and continues to be a barrier, just as Adele has mentioned many times. And so that's partly one of the reasons why we have those structured classes, programs, and partnerships, so that we can provide them those devices, and we know they're going to be able to learn how to use them.
And if I could just follow on with that, I was just going to mention that. So our initial work we've done with ARPA funds, and the ARPA funds didn't have the funding that Paulina was talking about for devices. So all of our training has been, if you had a device, great. If you didn't, you can learn some things. We're really excited because we did get the grant, the Digital Connectivity and Navigators grant, where we're going to be handing out devices. So our structure has had to change to a different format with the devices as well as the specifics for the grant.
Those are all very, very excellent points. Good insights. The note about the cybersecurity cell phone safety course for aging folks, it hits me in particular at this moment. I have my grandparents we're taking caution with our grandparents and their use of their internet enabled devices. Thank you. Sorry, let me refine my place in our questions here. There's a very, very good dialogue you guys had going. And so as you're excited with the device distribution program, Adele, have you seen any sort of demand or an interest in or considered offering virtual training with the programs as you get devices out into folks' hands? Is this something that you've looked at, or?
We have talked about it internally, but a lot of the people that we work with, and especially with the new grant, are low income, and so we want to make sure we're attending to their needs. And our experience has been that a lot of people need a lot of hand-holding. And so if we get to the point, the nice thing is with the online classes and people having their own devices, they can now take the device home and do North Star, which is an online course online, and then contact us and stuff. So we're thinking about that, but we haven't done anything like Paulina has.
Gotcha. And then, yes, Paulina, you have some more experience in offering virtual trainings. Go ahead. What has the engagement been there?
Absolutely. So as an organization, I always think it's funny, but it's not. It was really challenging at the time, but we actually had launched our digital skills training program at the beginning of 2020. So it was developed originally as an in-person program to teach digital skills, and then the pandemic, shut everything down in March of that year. And so we very quickly had to decide whether or not we wanted to pivot to a virtual program, and we did. We did pivot, and granted, it takes a lot of coordination on the front end with partners, especially in our case, we primarily work with partner organizations, right, or entities, to coordinate all the logistics of getting devices into the hands of people who are going to be taking the classes. So for example, I remember in 2020, 2021, we were shipping devices directly to people's homes. Just because it was just not safe, of course, for us to come together. While that changed a little bit towards the end, I remember holding some tech support days outside, in person, social distanced, so there were ways to get around it. Now, obviously, to Adele's point, in person is certainly the preferred ideal modality of instructions for novice learners. But certainly I do think there's still a demand both for digital navigation services and skills training. We often see it from older adults actually, but specifically those who do not have transportation to go to an in-person location, or maybe have mobility issues. So they just physically cannot get to a location to go in person for support. There's also now immigrant communities that are not comfortable leaving their homes, but are still high in need. Veterans, folks who are used to going to used to getting services in the home, so like every different population of the covered populations that we're looking to, there will always be some sort of kind of intersection where folks might not be able to go. Even, similar to how Adele mentions that they work a lot with their DDR partner organizations, the ones we work with. Sometimes they don't have a physical location that you can bring folks into. Sometimes, again, transportation, maybe it's in a part of town that is just not really easily accessible via public transportation. Folks would have to walk or drive there, and that's not reasonable for everyone on a consistent basis. and sometimes even the broadband connection itself. You're having broadband issues today. The internet can be so unreliable unexpectedly for many different reasons. And in our modality of programs, we're bringing together probably anywhere between 15 to 20 learners in the same room, all connected to the same internet connection. And sometimes that's just too much. The network connectivity is not enough, doesn't have enough bandwidth to support and have everybody be able to do what they need to do online. And so for those reasons and many others, sometimes the participants will really ask us to prioritize doing a virtual class. We might perhaps bring them in person we do what we call a device distribution at the beginning, where we actually bring them together to unbox the devices that we provide for them and help them kind of go through the setup process, because those are all digital skills as well. And so they'll do that in person and then take them home, as Adele mentioned, take them home and then kind of continue on either self-paced or with a structured curriculum program that we've developed in partnership with an organization.
Is my audio clear? Can you hear me? That was wonderful, Paulina. Thank you very much. You dug into some unique barriers that virtual trainings are particularly well suited to overcome, as far as transportation, the connection itself, as my video is maybe frozen for you or bouncing around. Hopefully my voice is clear enough. Adele, are there any unique barriers that you've encountered that maybe don't get enough attention or are otherwise worth highlighting?
Transportation can be an issue. Also, just people get busy, and so that's another thing that we've had is people have great intentions, and sometimes that falls off. But we found that teaching our trainers how to be empathetic and coaching success and being excited. Hey, you got that one right. That's really, really good. Let's see you do it again on this thing. Can really help people really engage with the trainer. A lot of the people we have are first time using a computer. And so having the students gain confidence in their digital skills and encouraging them to practice online is really helpful. And so, it helps build that trust and comfort, especially for those who are new to technology and already concerned that they don't know how to use it.
Thank you, Adele. That personal connection, I think, is really important. I think that's something that maybe cannot be stressed enough. Having that motivation, because there is, I think, often there can be a stigma associated with just a lack of knowledge in any area, but in particular using technology where it's everywhere now in the world. So yeah, having that personal touch and helping folks overcome a potential sense of stigma. Moving on, let's talk about some training programs. Or training materials, training resources. Adele, you noted that you found North Star to be a good resource for your team in digital skills training, and you mentioned that North Star can actually be used for self-guided trainings. One of the potential benefits of having devices, being able to get devices into folks' hands. Within your current training program, how much of that is sort of self-guided, and how much is directly taught by the navigators?
So again, with the ARPA work that we've done historically, it depends on the needs of the user. We were able to do whatever kind of the person wants. With the new grant, it's going to be a lot more restrictive because we have goals that we need specifically to meet in training. And so the North Star is just one of the tools that we use. It actually has a cost to it. There are other online models. We like it also because it has the ability to be in Spanish and in English, and that's important for a lot of our learners. But our digital navigators act as guides if we're using North Star often, and offer support when the learners can't navigate the lessons by themselves. Most of the training is facilitated by our digital navigators, even when the learners are technically engaging with the self-guided platforms, just to be a support there. We found that many of our students still need support through the process, from navigation and comprehension to staying motivated, as I mentioned. And now that we're working with the structured curriculum, and really making sure that, you know, people attend to meeting specific training goals, you know, and can use the computer, for example, and those types of things. We're shifting more to a supportive guide and stepping in only when needed. But again, it depends on the individual. A lot of this, just like your teacher at school, you know, the teacher has to adjust to the individuals that are learning. They can't just be a robot up there just saying, you know, how to do their algebra. People will get lost. And so it's the personal touch. And I know that Pauline does that online with her programs. It's, you know, and you get to know the people, and they're so appreciative of the time and the learning that they're getting and the ability to go forward in life. So that's really what's a lot of people who are doing digital navigation work really like. I've had people come back, I never thought I was going to do this, but I really like this work.
That's great. That is really wonderful. The work truly is rewarding, and that is nice to hear. I like that you mentioned the multilingual support as well. That is a key. You noted previously cultural awareness, cultural competency, and sort of sensitivity to where others might be, and offering that, making that personal connection. Paulina, how are your trainings structured? Do you have, I understand you have some of your own self-developed curriculum. Do you utilize North Star or digital literacy, any other tools?
All of the above. To your point, we have our own basic skills curriculum that we developed in 2020, and actually we just redesigned it to be even more to be even easier for participants to kind of follow along. Lots of big graphics, big pictures. You know, we're often working with folks who can't see, you know, 11-point font on a page or on a screen, right? So the accessibility factor is also important here with regards to our basic skills curriculum. But wherever it makes sense, all of our instructors are encouraged to leverage publicly available resources like North Star, like Goodwill, GCF Learn, the Google Digital Skills Curriculum, Microsoft Basic Office 365. All of the publicly available resources are often brought in as, hey, you know, our class and our funding only covers X amount of time, but as you look to continue to engage and learn more skills, here are some other available resources that you can continue to use. We generally meet with participants anywhere between 10 to 12 hours, as I mentioned earlier, but over usually a number of weeks. So we've done, I think our more traditional session, we call them cohorts. Our more traditional cohorts are about 2 hours a week for about 6 weeks. Including of the device distribution, where we give them the devices at the beginning to use for the rest of the program. Sometimes, depending on the population, we'll do like 2 4-hour sessions for 8 hours of training, you know, plus the device distribution, you know, so there's a lot of different modalities that we use, but that's all, again, very customized to the partner, to the population, to the objectives of the classes. We build our classes to have kind of like a lecture facilitated presentation on what the skill is that you're trying to teach the learners in that moment, but also office hours where you're just there practicing. You know, digital skills is a very tactical skill. Like, you can't just learn by listening and hearing someone talk about it. You need to put your hand on the keyboard and, you know, on the trackpad and learn how to use it. And so we build in time for participants in our classes to just sit there and practice. And, you know, when we've done it virtually, we'll have them share their screen. So that's usually the first skill we'll teach them. Share your screen so that we could see where your cursor is moving, how you're kind of getting to each of these different skill sets. So there's a number of different tools that we've used. And to Adele's point, Our curriculum is currently available in English, Spanish, Punjabi. We actually just translated into Punjabi, and we're in the process of translating it to Chinese. But one of our core tenets of equity is just making sure that if there is a population where we don't currently have that language support, we will work with a partner to bring together a class that's ready to move forward as soon as we get that translated. And we build it into our budget wherever possible so that we have that flexibility and be able to reach those communities that are often not being able to be served. Most of digital skills resources are in English. And so you're primarily only going to see folks who can engage with that, who speak English. And if you don't speak English, then you're already kind of, that's another barrier that is being added to their ability to learn digital skills.
Thank you for those insights, Paulina. So we had talked about so multilingual support or potential language barriers, and we had talked about transportation, and you noted just now, Paulina, tailoring sort of the length of classes, the structure, how often you're meeting throughout the week, how long each individual meeting might be. What are some other ways that you tailor lessons and training to the specific group, the population that you're working with?
Trying to think of different populations. So, if we're working with a group that is looking to upskill and, workforce development, kind of improve their workforce skills, we'll integrate sessions on resume building, how to do a job search. I feel like those are things that people expect everyone to know how to do, right? But a lot of folks that come to us and to our partners are used to knocking on doors, going in person and asking just folks if they have a job. And it's very different in today's age to do a Google search of, jobs in Racine, Wisconsin, might give you a lot of different results that aren't actually accurate. There's a lot of paid prioritization happening on search engines nowadays. There's a lot of AI that's being used, right? That was mentioned earlier today as well, that gives the impression that things are available when they might not be. And there's a high level of digital kind of skills needed to be able to kind of look through the responses and be like, this actually is not what I'm looking for. This doesn't apply and whatnot. And so we tailor it based on the different populations. Like we're primarily serving, I think, for example, 97% of our participants are women. And so sometimes we're looking to provide examples that make sense for them in terms of managing their family finances, managing their children's education. As Adele mentioned this at the top of our panel, like what is important to each person or what's important to each group of people that you're serving, because that's going to be the hook that's going to get them to want to come back and continue to stay engaged with our program with the digital navigators and really kind of set them up for success in terms of this is the beginning of their digital skill learning journey. Because if it has a direct impact on something that's important to them, they're going to want to stay engaged with it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paulina. Adele, do you have anything you would like to add?
Just wanted to mention when we were talking about culturally appropriate things, we actually spend a lot of time. I got some statistics around the city of Racine. We're 50% white, 23% Hispanic, 20% Black, and the rest is mixed. 18% live in poverty. Our median household income is only $55,705 as of 2023. 27% are under 18 and 14% are over 65. 4% are veterans. And so going back to that kind of, making sure we're meeting the people where we are is we educated our trainers on different potential life struggles of the potential learners, including understanding cultural awareness, how to work with people in the community that may be different and have different experiences from the trainers, different forms of trauma and empathy that they needed to be prepared to understand and work with the people in appropriate ways. Trainers started by getting to know the community they serve. Now, granted, most of ours are actually from the community that they serve. But we also went over with them their values, communication styles, any barriers they may face assessing technology. Because again, most of the trainers I have are college students, but a lot of them actually are returning college students. So we've got a variety of ages in there. But we intentionally chose tools and platforms that are familiar, going to Paulina's point, examples from the local businesses and community events or social media platforms that they use, making sure that the training that we do resonates with learners, using visuals, like she said, in language that are inclusive and reflective of the diverse population we serve. Our goals are to creating a learning environment that feels familiar, safe, and empowering so that everyone of the learners feels seen, respected, and capable of growth. We use different ways to do that, but that's some of the things that, we really try hard. And I know Pauline does the same thing with her programs.
I was going to say that, yeah, I was going to add to what Adele said. We hire directly from the communities we're serving. So we're looking to our partners to help refer folks to us for our independent contractors who serve as digital navigators and digital skills instructors. Primarily, we've actually been very successful in getting like staff members who are like looking for extra pocket change or wanting to continue to support the communities they're already serving. Especially right now is a very tough economic and job climate where there are a lot of folks looking for some spare, some additional funding in their pockets. Everything that Adele said, though, is right on the money too. Hiring from the local communities, really providing them the understanding if they don't already have it. But I feel like that's relatively rare in our instances. Like folks understand the digital divide has impacted either them or someone in their family directly, and so they understand why this work is important. One other thing too that I just want to highlight I feel like it goes in line with cultural competency a little bit, but patience, like that's one of the things that we also look for when we're hiring folks to join our roster of instructors and digital navigators. We can teach you how, what the demographics and how to consider communities and whatnot. But if you don't have patience to kind of sit there with someone and help understand the same thing over and over to them, then they might not be very successful in this type of role. And so that's something that is not necessarily something that can be taught, but people surprise you. But that's one of the main things that we also look at in terms of cultural competency. I, as a Latina woman, am going to identify, and a Latino participant is going to identify much more with me than perhaps with someone else. But if I don't have patience for them to teach them, which it wouldn't work out, right? And so that's kind of part of this whole thing that we want to ensure that folks feel comfortable, because they're in a very vulnerable position coming to our organizations, our resources to say, I don't know how to do this. We work a lot with folks who maybe perhaps didn't have formal schooling. And so to come in and say, as an adult, I need help and I can't figure it out on my own, it puts people in a very vulnerable position. And we want to kind of help mitigate that, help them feel comfortable and secure that all of our team members are going to, understand why, that there might be other situations or other ways that life has impacted their ability to learn these skills. And that's okay. We can all learn, we can all start somewhere and go from there.
Awesome. Thank you. So patience and motivation starting to sound a lot like parenting. So very, very good points on cultural awareness, cultural competency. As folks come in the door, understanding where they're coming from, roughly, or even if not, being open and approaching them in a proper way. Very, very good points, good insights. How do you guys get folks in the door? So when we've talked somewhat about the stigma and the vulnerability, folks coming in. How do you get them to come to you with these needs?
Well, for us, the device has been a really big incentive, other than just, being able to help folks learn a skill or learn something that they need to do. For example, if you're on social services, you need to fill out food stamp application. That's an online form more than ever now. And so like there are some specific, as we were talking about, there's some specific reasons people reach out to us, but then the computer in our program that we give to them and they get to keep if they've, reached a certain minimum number of hours they've worked with us is a huge incentive, again, because it's just such an expensive piece of equipment that most families can't afford to buy on their own, or they can't afford multiple of them because there might be multiple children, multiple adults in the home that need access to a device. And so that's been a really big driver of folks coming to us, is because we provide that device as the incentive.
And we work very closely with our Digital Divide Roundtable members, and basically as they're already serving the population that we want to help, they already have the people who need that extra work. So we come in, and as Paulina said at the beginning, there are a lot of people that are already doing this work. So we're just providing often some extra capacity and capabilities that they might not have, extra warm bodies even, to train the people in these skills. So we rely on the DDR members mainly, and then do social media marketing, flyers. We've got some organizations that go door to door, things like that, just to try to make sure people are aware of what we have at like the community centers.
I'll just quickly add, that's exactly, thank you, Adele, for mentioning. I wanted to mention it earlier and I forgot that like the trust that folks have in some of these established organizations is huge. Like, unfortunately, not too many people know who Everyone On is and that we're a digital inclusion organization. But if they see that we've partnered with the Boys and Girls Club of Racine to work together and provide this resource, we're able to tap into the trust that they have into these established organizations and provide them the resource. They might not otherwise come to us, in our case, might not come to us to get information or even just find out. But if they hear that the Boys and Girls Club has, to some extent, or any organization has vetted the partner, right? So have they worked with the Dell and they know that the effort out of Racine is a legitimate one? Because unfortunately there are a lot of scams around internet connectivity devices that people pull out there, right? And so if they feel like the trust that they have in their local anchor institutions is well received and that they're partnering with someone else, then they're going to feel comfortable in attending and kind of going in to find out more information or using those resources. So that trust factor is really huge.
Excellent. Yeah, as Troy noted, trust is a key point, one of the values in the Wisconsin State Digital Equity Plan that we are looking to further. I think we've seen both from your experiences and what you two have shared, and then even in the past panel, that partnerships and those collaboration is very important to success. I will note we've got a good number of questions and a bit of dialogue in the chat. I will note the resources that Adele and Paulina have referenced. Those will be shared, so they will be included in the slides, which will be shared out following the event. So we will share the resources that we have referenced here in the discussion. See, I'm getting choppy again. I apologize, and thank you for your patience.
Since one of the recent questions that came up was a request to share position descriptions, I know that Sean Steen of DataNet inserted a link to one of those, and I myself dropped in a Digital Navigator baseline job description from the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. Kumar, are you still with us? You want to? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Seems like you cleared up. Let's be optimistic.
Perfect. Good. I hope so. Thank you, Troy. Yes, so I'll make sure, as folks are sharing resources as well in the chat, I'll make sure to go through and capture those and include them with what we have in the slides already. So we'll capture everything for you. With that, we are at 10:02. We've got 5 minutes before we hit our scheduled 5-minute break. We can run over that if needed, but let's start getting to some questions. If anyone, any of our other facilitators has one handy to rattle off, I'm otherwise scrolling up to
there's
find
one in the chat. For Paulina, what kind of devices are you talking about?
Yeah.
to your programs?
Great question. We, depending on the funder and the grant, it all depends on the budget. So primarily we have used Chromebooks. We have found that it works really well for novice learners since there's not too many different software and too much functionality to start. And they're just much cheaper overall for our use. But in Wisconsin, for example, we're actually transitioning over to Windows-based devices, given especially we also are a DCN recipient this year. So there's also specific grant guidelines that indicate that the devices must be able to be used when not connected to the internet, which Chromebooks are generally not. Like they're not that they're completely useless, but Chromebooks are much more useful when connected to the internet versus Windows devices can be used even though they're not connected to the internet. So we're going to be doing that. But we primarily focus on Chromebooks and Windows devices versus some other organizations use tablets or smartphones. And that's all great. It's just we are looking to bring folks on to learning how to use Chromebook laptops, basically.
Perfect. Thank you. And another question that we have, I believe this will be for you as well, Paulina. What type of contract do you set up with the independent digital navigator contractors? Do you have a template that you'd be willing to share?
We do have a template. I'd be happy to share maybe, and tomorrow, I don't know, we can coordinate on details if I send it to you to send out to everyone, or we can pass along my information for folks to reach out directly if that's a need for them. But essentially what our contract stipulates is, and we're actually we have an onboarding for some new instructors and digital navigators tomorrow where their contract stipulates that they're joining a roster of contractors and digital navigators so that whenever there is a class or an event or situation available where we need digital navigator or instructor support, we will put a call out to that roster and see who is available. And so that provides us the flexibility to offer a wide range of times and days that our folks are available, and also provides our instructors and digital navigators the flexibility to fit it into their personal schedules. Like I mentioned, right now there's a lot of folks looking for new jobs and looking to switch their part-time to full-time, and so while that happens, they can choose to sign on to support a class, sign on to provide digital navigator services during an event at a time that works for them. So we do kind of stipulate those pieces in the contract. And I know there was a question around like cost. Because it isn't a full-time or even a part-time position, we do pay more per hour for those services. I think we're about $35 per hour right now. But again, because it's limited time-bound engagements that they are opting into versus a consistent commitment across a certain amount of time.
Thank you, Paulina. A similar question for you, Adele. Would you be willing to share what the pay rate is for your digital navigators? How long do they stay with the program? How long and intensive is the training for the navigators?
So I put that in the chat. We pay about $20 an hour. The part-time students, it's based on the city's pay rate. For similarly skilled people, we train them up ourselves. And so a lot of it's almost a train the trainer. The first group of people we actually still have them from last year when they started and got trained by everyone on. And so we train some of those skills. And then we also train some other learnings that we've had just about working with our community and things like that. And then what was the third question?
How long and intensive is the training? And then how long do they stay with the program?
Well, so far, we started it last summer, so we still have a lot of them with us. Some had to leave, so because they're students, some of them just did it during the summer, but we've had a lot that have stayed on. So they can stay as long as they want. And then the extent of the training we do, we get a certain place and then they get mentored. And so the trainer sits with an experienced trainer for a while they go in and do some of the trainings, and then they get to go on their own. So that's kind of how we make sure that people feel confident. We also have a weekly meeting of all of our digital navigators to go over what their experience that week, basically, who have they met, what questions that they get that they didn't know how to answer, and then they support each other. If somebody's been asked to write a PowerPoint presentation for maybe one of the veterans groups to show them some new learning, they often work together on that and then give each other feedback. So it's become a very nice little group of people that self-support each other.
Nice. Awesome. That's impressive. Laudable that you have that set up. And I think those students sticking on year over year, as you mentioned, they like the work. It definitely says something. Our next question, how does a lack of availability and affordability of broadband internet in Racine impact your work?
So since we have a decent amount of it, we're very excited to be able to get the devices and hand those out because that's a major need. A lot of people are like, well, I don't have a device, so why would I learn something? So we're really excited to be able to start filling that gap. But we still have the gap of affordable internet. We have two different providers, AT&T and Spectrum Charter here in Racine. And so both organizations do have low income plans, but for some, of course, those are still not large enough. And so a lot of the organizations, the DVR organizations, allow people to, if they're going there for a service, they can use one or two of their computers. And then we also have a library that people can go to. We provided maps online to show where the different community centers are, where the trainings are, where the bus routes are in reference to that. So people can see that, they can hop on a bus to get to a lot of these places. And so we're trying to do everything we can to make it easier to get people to where there is free internet. We have a map of all the free internet locations within the city. So we're trying to do a variety of things to help spread the word of, if you don't have it in your house, there are places that you can go. Is that the greatest solution? No, but at the moment, that's the solution that we can offer people. And it's at least something to give them the information of where they could go.
Yes, certainly. That is, I think, a great resource that you have. Putting the bus routes on the map to your training locations. That'll be the last question. We are running into our break time now. Thank you both for a very wonderful discussion. Lots of excellent insights.
Hi, everyone. I'm Josie Lathrop. I'm a program and policy analyst with the Public Service Commission. I have been with the commission about 2 years. I work on broadband access and affordability across both the digital equity and the BEAD programs. Christina is nicely running my slides today. So Christina, could you flip to the next slide, please? Okay, and we'll have our panelists introduce themselves. Jessica, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I am Jessica Hatch. I am the broadband coordinator for Door County, Wisconsin. My position is two hats, really. So I work on broadband access and adoption with our municipalities to coordinate public-private partnerships with internet service providers to develop cost-effective fiber networks that'll meet the future needs of residents and businesses in the county. And then I also work on building partnerships across county departments and local not-for-profits related to digital skill building and supporting the digital skills building network. Our focus really is to facilitate collective learning about innovative best practices and raise awareness about digital skills building efforts in the community. Our Digital Access Coalition is hosted under the United Way of Door County in partnership with the Door County Broadband Office, my office. And we currently have 6 non-for-profits and 4 county departments involved.
Great. Catherine or Kate, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me. My name is Kate Merton. I'm the Executive Director of Health Equity Innovation Partners, HEIP, and we are one of the founding members of the Rural Health Innovation Alliance, which is a coalition that is being built between the Mayo Clinic, UW Eau Claire, ourselves, and other partners that are coming on board to improve access to healthcare to the underserved and those in rural environments. And part of receiving improved access to healthcare is often education about how you actually do that, and digital navigation and community health workers are an important part of that. So we are building out that coalition and looking forward to participating today.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Cheryl, would you please introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, thank you so much, Josie, and thank you everyone for having me this afternoon. I'm Cheryl Isbell with Covering Wisconsin. I'm in the Milwaukee Community Engagement Lead and Licensed Health Insurance Navigator for the state of Wisconsin. Covering Wisconsin is a program that is within the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Extension Health and Wellbeing Institute, and we are the state of Wisconsin's health insurance navigator contract agency for CMS. Primarily, my job focuses on building partnerships, educating community partners and consumers throughout Southeast Wisconsin, attending a lot of events and providing health insurance literacy to consumers in these communities, as well as just building relationships and trust for Covering Wisconsin as that trusted source of referral to help people with health insurance coverage, either with the state or through the federal health insurance coverage programs. We do all of our work across the state in all 72 counties for free. And the way we do this is we educate, we enroll, and we help consumers be aware of how to maximize and advocate for themselves utilizing their insurance coverages. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So as you can tell, we have just such a great breadth of experience in coalition building here. So we're going to follow the format of the other panels, and I'll facilitate a discussion with some questions, and then we'll take your questions at the end. So the first question I'd like to start with is, what traditional or non-traditional partners have you built coalitions with? And how did you and do you go about identifying partners for coalition building? And so anyone can feel free to jump in here.
Well, for my office, that was an easy decision because I'm on a not-for-profit board for early childhood education, and I was already aware of and friendly with the director at the United Way and have a history with the United Way and what they do in our community. So that was an easy ask for me when I went into my office to bridge the divide and reach out to the Door County United Way. And they have a group that they host, which is a monthly not-for-profit group meeting under the United Way. And not every not-for-profit in the county is involved, but a lot of them are. So that was an easy way for me to bridge conversations and kind of let them know what we were planning on doing, starting those conversations. And then also an easy discussion with my county departments, the Veterans Department, the ADRC, the Health and Human Services Department, just kind of making them aware that we're having these conversations, we're starting this, we're doing this coalition building, and, just reaching out and explaining really what the goal was.
I would follow on with what Jessica says and said, I think clarifying for everyone that you're trying to build the bridge and finding a common goal has always been very important to us. And HIP, we've found that we will work with a lot of not-for-profits. We obviously work with a lot of health systems and clinics, and then we leave no stone unturned when we try and find support for things. So often that does actually mean going into corporate environments and trying to understand how what they're trying to do with their business also aligns with the goals of perhaps what we're trying to do from a more philanthropic perspective. So bringing in multiple different groups, and I've had everything from sort of law firms want to jump into corporates, as well as sort of the health systems and, luckily United Way and other groups that we want to work with. So it's been highly varied. And can be very diverse also, because sometimes you might be working in a state like Wisconsin, but you often find that others from outside of the state might have an interest of coming in and being helpful as well.
Yes, and with covering Wisconsin, I'm going to echo what Catherine and Jessica just shared with the non-traditional and traditional partners that we work with. We tend to work with partners that have the same purpose that they're working towards, as well as mission and vision for communities throughout the state of Wisconsin. Some of those entities might be public and nonprofit community-based organizations, hospital systems, county reentry programs, child care centers, any entity that is serving underserved, underrepresented populations of people that either don't have access to health insurance coverage or just don't have access to health care. So basically, that's the partnerships that we involve ourselves with, as far as getting into community, helping consumers with those challenges of social determinants of health. And so we partner with them, and we collaborate and involve ourselves in those coalitions that have those particular partnerships on the same program, on the same board, working towards the same mission of building healthy communities across the state.
Josie, I would also be remiss if I didn't mention, I have my county broadband committee, and we have a lot of stakeholders that are involved. So economic development, healthcare, utilities. So I have this, cohort of my committee members also for that outreach and that bridge into those stakeholders in this work as well.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I was just going to kind of recap, and some things that I kind of heard are using existing connections, using existing committees, finding that common goal or that common mission, and then kind of identifying partners from there. And then, working with partners, again, with the same purpose, same common goals. And then looking at both public and private organizations is something I heard, which I think is a very good point. Any other thoughts on partnerships before we move on?
The only thing I would mention is we discussed this when we all talked the other day, that those partnerships that I have already have roots in the community, and they have already done a lot of trust building, and they know their clients and their patients really well. So that helps with that barrier a little bit, where we can at least maybe move the needle a little bit faster, because this is very slow work that we do when we're coalition building and explaining to everyone what happens, or what the goal is, really, like what we want to get to. So that in itself is important.
Yeah, I've definitely. Oh, go ahead, Cheryl.
I'm sorry. I would just like to add to what Jessica said. What we try to do is also find, we do align ourselves with community partners that have that cultural competence in knowing, the communities that they serve. They have the relationships, and building trust with Covering Wisconsin is necessary to have those strong relationships with those organizations that are working with specific populations of community members, and that we use them for networking, and we basically use each other for networking. So it's a give and take. It's not just a take all or you get all the information. So we center ourselves and build those relationships with those community members and organizations that have the trusted relationships that we can come in and tap into and share our knowledge with these organizations so that they can impart that onto the constituents that they serve in their communities.
Yeah, absolutely. So finding those trusted partners, particularly when you're working with these covered populations, and finding partners that have that cultural competence, I think is so important, Cheryl. So thank you for bringing that up. So the next question I have is kind of about running the coalition itself. It's a broad question. It's so who leads the coalition efforts and how is the coalition structured? And I know that that might vary based on the type of coalition. And then anything that we should know about kind of coalition logistics, like running a coalition.
Yeah, I'm happy to lead off on that, just share sort of our experience. I've had the pleasure and privilege of doing it in different states and actually across the US when it comes to coalition building. We generally run them virtually. We often find it is good to make sure you have at least one annual in-person meeting. You can never get over the importance of actually like connecting with people in person, especially kind of to Cheryl and Jessica's point, when you're trying to do community work, you shouldn't be doing everything virtually. You actually do have to meet people in person. And one of the things that we have found through sort of painful experience is that tracking your progress, even if it is not successful progress all the time, because progress is going to be lumpy in coalition building, is track it very carefully. And I think this might go into like the discussion we want to have around goals as well. So whoever that you bring into the coalition, make sure that everyone is really clear on what's happened. Make sure everyone constantly stays sort of involved as well. You never want anyone to feel left out because then you get a drain of energy from the coalition. There's just a couple of points.
Great tips, Kate. I appreciate that.
In my coalition work, we have a lead agency that can bring to the table those expertises in data collections and sharing out really relevant information to be able to help us get to our common goal and knowing who to target and where to target and just knowing what the needs of those specific communities are by surveying the community and talking to the people that live in those communities, that have the lived experiences in those communities, that can share out which concerns are most priority to them. And so a lead agency will have specifics that they've charted, and they'll bring them to the coalition membership, and then we decide how to prioritize what are the top priorities, and not make them too long. 4 to 5 is a good number to give yourself time to be able to work on those priorities effectively and efficiently, and establishing those subcommittees that have specific duties to see that specific work is being done within those priority areas that we're working on.
Great. That's really great insight, Cheryl. Jessica, do you have any thoughts on this?
So we do have like I said, we have United Way as our lead organization for this, and we're still learning a lot about this work because we're relatively new in the past. I say 2 years, and that seems like that's not new, but it really is, because it's very slow work and trust building. And we utilize NDIA has a lot of resources available for the coalition work, and we offer virtual and in person for all of our meetings, and we usually get a heavier virtual attendance because we all have very challenging schedules a lot of the time. I have the benefit of just being not far from the United Way. So I try to be in person as much as possible for those so that the director and I can also then discuss maybe what our next steps are going to be. But even in the conversation that we had, yesterday, I've learned a lot just from Catherine and Cheryl on some concepts that might be really helpful for us, like having some subcommittees once we get larger and get heavier into that work. And I have the benefit also of the in-state subcommittees that we meet and having those discussions with everyone there and being able to kind of take some best practice from them. So we're not necessarily reinventing the wheel or even inventing the wheel, but really taking some best practice from some areas in Wisconsin already have things established.
If it's okay, Josie, I wanted to add on what Jessica just reminded me of something. I wasn't sure if you wanted in this discussion for us to kind of like delve into the details of actually how you run the thing, because it all sounds good in theory of like joining a coalition and everyone's got a ton of energy. And in some cases, it has gone very well and there doesn't need to be contractual agreements. And then in other cases, depending upon the coalition, we've actually put together some light-hearted MOUs just so everybody kind of understands the rules of the road of like, I'm committing to keep having a conversation with you and I am endeavoring to get to the same goal. Like Cheryl says, having groups with a shared goal is so incredibly important, and having people who care enough just to maybe write their name down on the MOU so you all feel like you're in it together and everyone's just as committed. I say that's actually one thing that in certain places we've found particularly helpful.
That's a great idea.
Incredibly good advice, and I'd never heard of that in my prior work, and I think that's, if you're finding that something that might be helpful, I think it's great to share. So some things that kind of rose to the top for me are, I like the idea of having a hybrid meeting, but I also really do think that, the idea of like having one meeting in person annually would be like maybe great. I really do think there's something about that face-to-face connection. It sounds like a common theme is kind of a lead agency. I would imagine maybe even like a lead staff person at that agency, And then I believe it was Cheryl who talked about narrowing your priorities, and I really like that advice, like finding like 4 to 5 priorities and really narrowing it down that much. And I also really like the recommendation to use those NDIA resources because they do have some really great resources compiled. And so there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So this next question that I have is also about coalitions. If there's, feel free to go off the question a little bit if it spurs other thoughts, but it's about goal setting. So how do you set and adjust goals for the coalition? And feel free to jump in anywhere.
I'm happy to go first. I don't always done this quite a bit. And I think as we discussed on our prep call, there is always an incredible amount of energy when you start a coalition. Everyone is really wanting to do the good work. So there should be goal setting for the coalition itself. And we also concentrate upon how do the goals of each separate institute or group that are participating in that coalition also get served. Because at the end of the day, if someone moves on from, one particular part of the coalition, like that individual gets a job somewhere else, you still need that institution to sort of be on board, and it shouldn't just be dependent upon that individual. So when we build the coalition goals about the work that we want to do, we kind of go back, especially if maybe you're bringing in a corporate partner versus a not-for-profit, but the corporate partner has some business directed goals that they need to like tick the box to as well. So having some very clarifying conversations up front of like, okay, this is what we all want to do and what is each group going to get out of this, and let us document this in the progress. We talked, Jessica's highlighted this a couple of times, like progress is going to be lumpy. Sometimes it's going to be slow and then it's going to rapidly speed up. So being able to sort of, when everyone's saying, well, my goal didn't get met yet, well, that's great. We are going to get to it, and this is where the progress is. So I would say align coalition goals to the individuals and the institutions that are participating, and making sure that is clear at the outset.
Oh, I love that advice. I love you have to think about what's in it for them, and like making sure that their organization, again, all these organizations have individual goals, and how are their goals being served?
For me, this is a tricky one because we're so new that a lot of times the goals that I'm looking at they're so basic. Like, let's get to a meeting and let's have these discussions on what is digital equity, what are digital skills, it's educational based and has been for quite some time now, so that there's a general understanding of what we're trying to achieve. Which we do, we have some funding that we were awarded under the CPF Digital Navigators grant, so we will be getting devices soon, and we will have a part-time regional digital navigator. So we know now where our goals are going to be going, because we're going to be going into distribution. We'll be going into those meetings and everything. But for a while, it was just a matter of just very basics, the education of what this work is, and really helping the partnerships that I reached out to understand that they're already doing a lot of this work. So they may not call it digital skills, they may not call it digital equity, but our veterans office is helping veterans sign up for email and then establish an account so that they can get into and access benefits. And even Health and Human Services does that. The ADRC does, host digital events and do, how to use your iPhone, how to use your smartphone, just, basic, have an email, things like that. All of our partners do something that is already in this arena, and helping them understand that what they're doing is this work that we're talking about. So we're just at the very beginning still, and about to get out of the chute doing things. But I love these conversations, because that was what Catherine shared with us in the dry run, and even today it was like, oh, this is perfect. So this helps, in the next step for us to have these conversations. And even like the lighthearted MOU, that's a great idea, so that they really understand, we want you to show up. We want you to be part of the discussions. We need you to be here.
Chelsea, I'm going to just pivot a little. I agree with everything that Catherine and Jessica have just stated, but I just want to pivot a little bit on the goal setting. And I think that the first goal setting has to be with you, because with that, when you put out the invite for people to join the coalition, you might get 100 people wanting to be a part of it. But the goal setting that individually that you have to set for yourself is, do I have the time commitment, to give to this group, to share my ideas and give input and be 100% engaged in the process. Can I afford this amount of time, from my regular work schedule? Is there a time that's best for everybody to meet? Those sets of goals have to be the initial part of the process, I think, before you can establish within your coalition how to get started on your priorities, because it has to be that everybody is involved. And, initially in coalitions that I was a part of, COVID hit and everything went to virtual. And we were having meetings like every 2 weeks, because you didn't have that in-person connection, where you could actually physically sit down and just, off the cuff, come up with ideas or ad-libbed to someone else's idea. Now that things are so much better, having those monthly meetings, in-person meetings, is so important to solidifying goal setting. And then you can get to the next part. So
I think that's an absolutely great tip, Cheryl. I think, we all know what it's like to overcommit. And, whether it be that board of directors position or that volunteer position or whatever it is, just realize I'm not truly participating. I'm not adding anything. So I think really on a organization by organization or individual by individual basis, thinking about do I really have the capacity to meaningfully contribute? So I think that's great. So I, heard a couple of things like, how do you serve the coalition members' goals, their organizational goals? There's always a piece of self-interest there. Kind of, Jessica, I heard you kind of talk about laying the foundation through education. Sometimes you have to just sort of like talk about like what is digital equity to get everyone on the same page. And that kind of reminder that people might already be doing this work, whether or not they identify as doing that work. Yeah, and then lastly, what Cheryl said about, kind of goal setting with yourself first. So yeah, I think those are all great tips. Anything else on that topic? So before we turn to Q&A, I have one last question, and that is, how do you track progress on the coalition's goals? This is kind of that evaluation piece, and as you're kind of meeting maybe quarterly or annually or monthly or whatever it might be, how often are you revisiting those goals? How are you, assessing what you've accomplished? How are you assessing where to go next? So just kind of a general discussion about that.
Yeah, I would say, identifying, the way you would measure, the way we measure is have we made contact and had regular conversations with those stakeholders that are needed to assist in this change. Specifically speaking, lead poisoning. A lot of that's going on now in our schools. Lead testing in children was pretty much brought to a screeching halt during the years of COVID. How do we bring that back? So are we talking to our federally qualified health centers? Are we including our providers, our pediatricians? Are we including those agencies that have the ability to go out and do door-to-door canvassing? Have we connected with the right public officials to see what is happening so that we can report back on the ground, so that we can get promotional materials out to community members and families and schools and daycare centers and food banks and shelters, all of that sort of thing. So yeah, that, hopefully that answers your question, how we're tracking that. How many people have we touched? How many people and organizations are on board with this mission of abating the lead poisoning increases that we're seeing around the state right now, specifically in Milwaukee County?
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest ways to track progress is to track, for any coalition, is to track how many individuals you reached. That reach is so important.
Yeah, I was going to give the answer to this question two ways. I hate to sound like the more businessy side of things, but we often will use like a RACI tracker for like who is responsible, who is accountable, did you communicate it, and were you appropriately informed? That's like the very like, did you actually do it? We will try and do that quarterly, and then we'll make sure that the output is rolled up. But just to go back to what I think Cheryl was saying, which is the most important bit, is that you actually need to not just track like what was written down in a PowerPoint and did you have the connection, like what was the actual impact of what happened in the community? Ask those people who are essentially your customers, did you actually make any change for them? And so we will, in things that we have done previously, it's about going directly out to the patient and doing the before, what was the status before, and then what actually happened afterwards, because you can do all the sort of coalition management as you can, but it's did actually you get the good work done, and making sure that you're able to report out those numbers at the end of the year in some form of annual report.
And Kate, I think it's a great tip. I wanted to pause and for myself, because I'm not familiar with this, ask you about this RACI tracker, I believe you said. Can you talk more about that?
When you've done lots of different program management, so people are responsible for things, people are accountable for things, and they're two different, responsible and accountable, two different things. And then you have to make sure that who did you communicate it to and who was informed. It's just a management tool. And depending upon the coalition, some people love that, and other people that's a little bit too rigid for them. Often we use RACI charts if there's multiple members within the coalition. If I'm running one that's just got 3 or 4 members, it's probably not necessary.
Okay, great. No, but I mean, everyone's brain works differently, and some people really love specific tools like that. I've had coworkers who have used like, Microsoft project management tools, and that's not, I don't prefer to do things that detailed, but I think some people really like that. So, Jessica, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, for me right now, this is just one-on-one touch points with my coalition participants. So, for example, we're going to be applying for this grant. So I've been doing a lot of in-person meetings and touching base with those partners because it's just easier for me to meet them where they're at for their schedules, whether it's a virtual or in-person meeting. And also, for us, this will tie into access being available and then adoption, which will start to track as construction is moving further. We have fiber connections that are going to be coming online this year, a pretty decent amount in our area. So, we know where to focus in those areas and do outreach. And we have municipal broadband committees that are also stepping into this work and kind of their own little municipal coalitions and doing meetings where they're having discussions with community members on digital skill building and how to maybe do online banking. The hospital is showing up and talking about their portal access and how to access that, and we have different areas that they talk about local IT and cord cutting and, maybe saving some money and letting go of those satellite connections for TV and teaching people how to stream. So we'll have a survey that we're going to be issuing to start doing a lot of this tracking. So we'll have a better idea of those touch points and what our impact is going to be throughout the year. So really a digital skills survey and then my connection with my coalition partners. And once we have devices here and our part-time digital navigator, we'll be tracking those meetings as well.
Great. So yeah, things I heard were making contact with those stakeholders, just sort of like the number of organizations or stakeholders you are actually engaging with. Are we including all the necessary people? The idea of like a formal tracking tool like a RACI tracker, the impact of what has happened in the community, the people that we're trying to reach, and maybe something like a survey to kind of see what the results are. Anything else we want to add on that, on progress tracking?
There was one other quick thing, and it kind of goes back to a prior question about like who you work with in the coalition. I'm a massive fan of not reinventing the wheel. And like Jessica said, there's already a ton of people out there already doing the good work. And there is nothing more demoralizing than a new group coming in and trying to like reinvent and do the same thing. So really do your homework. And you obviously missed something. So really do your homework and understand who else is already doing that good work. Can you work with them, use their experience so that when you do develop goals and you're tracking progress, you've actually got historical data from before you even began to understand what the landscape was, if you know what I mean. So the work you've done isn't just done from like your start, but from when they started before. So it all kind of builds in together, like finding the right partners, understanding their goals, and then also being able to use their historical experience to track like longer progress. That was just one thing I wanted to add in about do not reinvent the wheel. Try and find people who are smarter than you and have already started this work before and kind of assist and enable them to do more.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, it's kind of like what Jessica was saying. It's, people may not identify as doing, digital equity work, but a lot of organizations have already been doing this. And so we can kind of build on that historical knowledge. So Milena sent me in the chat, we should be adding a question about sustainability. So what tips do you have? And that you can draw on your work history here too, because I know some of these coalitions are just getting kind of started. But what tips do you have for creating sustainable coalitions and thinking about longevity, perhaps after, X, Y, and Z funding source runs out, right? So that's like sustainability in funding the coalition, sustainability in the work, sustainability in staff, just kind of general sustainability. And I'm throwing that one out there. I didn't tell you I was going to be asking you that. So if you need a moment to think about it, that's totally fine.
Cheryl, do you want to go first?
Oh,
Oh,
go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, like, sustainable
No.
is actually
Yeah.
something we spend a lot of time thinking about, whether it's community health workers or digital navigators, because let's be honest, once the grant has run out, you want to hopefully have done enough sort of employment development work so that person's time is then reimbursed through another mechanism. So I think that's actually part of one of when we pick partners to come into the coalition, who can come into that coalition who maybe is going to help you think about regulatory pathways and reimbursement pathways and other things that can enable you to take the grant money, do the good work, and make sure all of that training doesn't just then stop. It then actually becomes an employment opportunity and other things. And that's often where sometimes we might bring in corporations to say, hey, the work that we're doing at some point is going to benefit you. So how, as we're doing this, can we then roll it into sort of economic development activities and that sort of stuff? And as we work a lot with a university extension actually in another state, and when we work with them, we always say the work that we're developing for this particular grant needs to be the basis for the next one as well, and that's why tracking your outcomes is so important. So sustainability from how does it apply for your next grant, and then also economic development opportunities. That's first and foremost. We always think about that.
Great. Yeah, I love that. I think, like some partners might have that more like fiscal knowledge. Some partners might have kind of like the political lay of the land, that knowledge. So I think like thinking about what your partners know about sustainability and working together collaboratively is so smart.
I was just going to say, from an aspect of sustainability, from a healthcare standpoint, where we align ourselves with health institutes, health facilities, those priorities that we're working on that we've contributed our information and knowledge upon and how we can help, whether it's promotionally or being on different boards and helping to move the needle forward, is always aligning and being a part of having those folks in your coalition or in your alliance that can continue to carry the work forward of whatever chronic illnesses it is, whatever barrier people are experiencing as it comes to healthcare in that landscape, making sure that the funding is already going to be available, that sustainability monetarily, that you have the right people on board agreeing to help you sustain this program for 5 years, for 3 years, so that you know that you have that ongoing help, and then always having a backup plan. When someone's money starts running out and they can't continue on with the grant funding, who else has that same mission and vision and passion for the work that you're doing and the facilities, hospital facilities or clinics or whatever that you're helping, to be able to help the people that they're serving can carry on that work. So the money doesn't dry up and you're not depending on one funding source. As we know now, we can't do that. If you're totally relying on federal funding, that could go away. So you have to have other funding streams that are committed to carrying on this good work.
Yeah, it's so important to think of sustainability right from the get-go. I think it's one of the hardest things to think about and to accomplish is to really make these coalitions sustainable, but it's very practical to say this funding will likely not always be here. Jessica, did you have thoughts on that? And if you want to pass, because I hadn't given you a heads up, that's totally okay too.
No, that's okay. I mean, it's something that I do think about and did think about because every grant has that question, right? And I also knew when I came into my position at the county, I'm just a limited term employee. So I have that issue where, I know my funding is going to run out probably in 2026 easily. So it's why I tapped United Way for this work, because they always have the same goals aligned as I did with this program, and they cover all those covered populations and they work with all those covered populations. So for me, you know, in my head, it would be part of their annual fundraising that they're doing and having staffing sustainably there for that, and maybe partnering with some of the other organizations that are involved already doing this work and can't necessarily carry, some of them carry a full-time person, like We Are Hope carries a couple of full-time people because they're our job office here in Sturgeon Bay. So they have that sustainability. So there's a couple partners involved in our organization that already have the funding and or do that fundraising for those positions. So I'm hoping that that will stay because they're not necessarily grant related. They're more of their local not-for-profit fundraising for those staffing positions. And they'd be happy to take some grant money while we have it, to kind of offset their budgets a little bit. But then, to keep it going also, volunteers is a huge focus in the area here that we're hoping to get off the ground because we have a really high population here of very well educated retired people that are very, very active in our not-for-profits in the community here.
Yeah, you are very lucky to have
We
that
are.
population in Door County, truly.
We are.
Yeah, so I think, something I heard you say that I think is definitely worth, repeating is, your position, unfortunately, is an LTE. It would be awesome if you were permanent. But maybe some of those partner organizations that are part of the coalition have other funding sources, right? So it's sort of like maybe doing that analysis of who has what as far as funding and ability for staffing. And then I think volunteers are another really great option to look at. I've been part of organizations that are 100% volunteer run, and it's amazing how dedicated volunteers really can be.
If you find their passion and that's what their passion is and they're good at it, that's just like the jackpot on it.
Exactly. Especially when you have that highly educated retired population that just wants something to do with their free time.
Yeah.
So any other we can turn to Q&A now, I think. So questions for this panel on coalitions. And feel free to unmute yourself, and I'm also trying to monitor the chat here. I think coalitions is a little bit more like of a vague concept for some people than digital navigators. Like we know about digital navigators, we know to ask about how much are we paying them, what are we trading them on? But coalitions, I think, is a little bit maybe of a different concept for some people.
I will repeat what I said in our dry run the other day. I was doing this work for, 2 years or whatever, and NDIA released all of this information on coalition building, and I didn't really have an idea that's what I had been doing. So it was great to kind of find that and realize like, oh, this is what I've been doing. This is my own goal that I've been kind of like pushing forward, and find a lot of materials that they compiled nationwide on it, and best practice. I think it is kind of a newer concept, maybe not for the people that have been doing it for a long time, but for those of us that are stepping into it.
So a comment and a question in the chat. So Jessica from Extension recommends a book. It's Connecting to Change the World. And she said it's about network building, but it's a similar concept. And Adele asks any pitfalls that we should be wary of.
I have a couple of pitfall stories, I think. I feel like I've been the one that's talked about how can you a lot of us work as sort of not-for-profits, or and sometimes we might need to bring corporate partners in. One thing I have learned with coalition building is that if you do have a for-profit partner that wants to come in, you need to make sure that they're in it for the long haul and they're not just doing it because this happens to be the flavor of the month topic with them. And I think kind of just going back to what Cheryl said right at the very, very beginning, you need to make sure that people have aligned goals, not just from sort of a business perspective, that they themselves, the people that dedicate their time, do they really want to be in this, and are they going to come back, you know, when times are tougher, money is running out, and are they really going to dedicate themselves to them? And that's sometimes where I found that kind of nice to have MOU important, because if people aren't willing to like write that down, sometimes corporates say no to that, like, okay, maybe you're not the partner that we want to have in. So that's just sort of a word of the warning, and why some of the reasons we've put some of our processes in place.
I think that's a great point.
I would say I'm too new to, but I've really enjoyed listening to a couple points that Catherine has made, that I'm kind of making mental note of, so that maybe we can avoid some of those. I think that's probably hard to avoid. Things are going to happen, but it's helpful.
I would just like to say, not so much of a pitfall, but some of the things that you definitely want to look at when you're engaging membership in coalitions is, do the membership have the empathy that's going to be needed to run this program? Can you build trustworthiness? Are they from a trustful organization that people trust them? Is the member, what's the change agent? Are they responsive, to change? What's their responsiveness? And behavior, you don't want memberships that are very confrontational all the time. So, people that can control their behavior, even when you agree to disagree with some topic that you're talking about or you're going over, and the willingness to engage in active listening or just joint learning. Those are just some things that I think are necessary in coalitions in order to get the work done effectively and efficiently.
And I think building off of that, Cheryl, this is more just about meeting running maybe, but I've certainly been part of groups that have like sort of ground rules about, like, I like that at the beginning of a meeting, setting rules of like, we're going to be active listeners, we're going to agree to disagree kindly, some of those things I think can really help, because absolutely personality conflicts and, can kind of cause some of these coalitions to spiral a bit. So we have about 5 minutes left. I do see a question in the chat from Milena. Any examples of coalition work that you have been a part of that you would kind of consider as a failure? And maybe I would add to that, like what we can learn from that.
That's a really good question. I'm trying to think which one. No, I'm kidding. Because we talked about on the prep call, like you have great ideas and you're going to have a timeline and you're going to hit this in 12 months. And I have examples of where we plan to do the work in 12 months and it actually took us 24 months to get some of the work done. I recently was involved in something actually in Illinois where we had a plan and this thing was going to get done in 9 months and it took us 18. We got there eventually and we tracked the outcomes, but we did actually have to appropriately track that, stages took longer because it actually involved another country and we didn't think about the regulatory aspects and the content, all this kind of stuff. So I have learned the hard way and been involved in things that unfortunately didn't work, but kind of like as Cheryl sort of alluded to, everything that Cheryl just said and the points you make, I 100% back them up. You have to make sure that everybody is on the same train as you, going to the same place, and actually has the empathy for what you're doing.
Okay, any other questions from the group? And again, feel free to unmute. Okay, we have a question here. It's a great question. The question is, I'm going to just read it. We are in a time of governmental uncertainty. Funding opportunities are questionable. How do organizations manage coalition building when a partner is no longer in business as a result of lost finances? I would say like look, maybe do some like mapping of like, potential partners. Have that backup plan. I think about alternative partners and try to have a deep bench of partners, especially now. It's like, Kate sounds like she works a lot in these public-private partnerships, and it's scary to think of like if you only have one corporate partner, right? And they're your main source of money if they're going out of business. So I would say, just like off the top of my head, it seems like really sort of trying to diversify your funding sources.
I think you just answered that question.
I just can't stand silence.
I think that's a good answer.
I literally just had that lived experience. We're part of sort of the ecosystem coalition that we'd built because of recent changes in the government. They've actually lost funding. They could no longer participate in what they had promised to do. So we kept the work that we were doing and to a certain degree involved, and we didn't have another partner that could switch in, but we actually am now trying to find an alternative funding source to supplement what is now gone. So we didn't have a backup group. We're trying to find a backup funding source.
Well, good luck with that, Kate. I think that's maybe a lesson learned how could you have foreseen that though? So
I think that this is a time where we have to think about our funding sources and our partners that are not directly in our fields, but they have, again, a passion for community, for the health of their community, because that is dependent on their businesses. So, sometimes you might have to go outside and build partnerships with law firms, banking industries, invite them to the table to hear about your work and understand how your work impacts the communities that they serve, and how necessary it is that the program continue on and that it is sustainable now and in the future. So sometimes we have to go outside because we all know that larger corporations, they do have corporate responsibility, to their communities to be able to help fund things that are going to keep their communities healthy. So I think that one of you said that backup plan when somebody drops off, again, someone that has the same mission, vision, a different industry, but it is something that they are focused on for their community to commit long-term to helping to keep the programs going that are helping the community.
Well, thank
Just
you all so
respond real
much.
quick to what's been said in the chat real quick. I've never served in the military, but I've learned a lot from military philosophy, especially rolling out digital solutions in low bandwidth contexts like Africa. And I would say that, the same thing that's true for partnership building is also true for donors and donor relationships. And it's, two is one is none, diversify, diversify, diversify. All of these things are, having redundant dependencies and redundant, Jessica said it really well in the chat, contingency planning, scenario planning, all of that really serves us in such tough times.
Networking, really, having your kind of, on the access side, we always talk about having your broadband champion, and I don't feel like this is any different, where you would have, your digital access or digital equity champion, and networking to make sure that you do have, some backup and contingency in there, for people to maybe take over that work for you. And if it's not on the financial side, which I saw the comment that popped up, and it's through a partner that was going to be doing that work, that hopefully you have another partnership that could maybe take that over for you, because you've been having discussions with other maybe not-for-profits or for-profits or just other stakeholders.
Well, this was a wonderful discussion, and I appreciate you all so much. It was just beyond what I was hoping for. But I do need to pivot us to our closing speaker, Alyssa Kenny, our Bureau Director. So take it away, Alyssa.
Thank you. What wonderful panels and what a great afternoon together. I just have a few remarks. I really just want to start by thanking our panelists, our keynote, and the PSC staff who have worked really hard at putting this event together, and also our interpreters who provided, an accessibility service that was just incredibly important, and their work is incredibly important and appreciated too. So thank you to everybody for making this day so wonderful. I frequently hear that broadband is sort of the oxygen of the economy. Without it, our economy, jobs, everything is not going to work. I think digital inclusion, though, and digital equity and opportunity, that's really the essential fabric of society and democracy. And so I'm so glad we spent the day today really focused on not just the wires and the towers, but how do we make sure everybody has access? And we think about the devices and the affordability and the adoption and the supports to really make sure. The other thing that just stood out to me this afternoon is there's so much good happening in Wisconsin. We're kind of a bit of a humble Midwestern group, but boy, there's some fantastic stuff, and I really hope it continues and expands. And I would not be doing my job if I did not do a final plug. Our commission has an open grant opportunity. The Digital Equity Capacity Grant for digital navigators and coalitions is open right now and accepting applications through May 20th at 1:30. I'm sure it was in the chat. I'm sure it will be in your follow-up email, but please, if you have a network, a place to share that information, we want people to know, and we want to try to get these federal funds out the doors to organizations who are doing this work so they can grow it and expand it and sustain it. So thank you again. That's it. And I think I'm last. People are nodding. So I think we get to maybe have some closing extra. There's our email, and we will make sure to do sort of a follow-up email with everyone who attended with slides and links and content tomorrow. But thank you again, everybody. Enjoy this wonderful spring day in Wisconsin.